even are hold items in Pokemon. Some of them can be used to make moves stronger, some evolve Pokemon, some cause them to transform, and others provide benefits in battle. But how do they work? And not just in the mechanical sense, but also in lore. Because your average Pokemon might gain benefits from them, but so do many legendary Pokemon throughout history. And where do they all come from anyway? Hi there, I'm Krillic, and I'm here to answer all of these questions and so many more. As always, this video will be separated into chapters that you can follow along with as I organize all of these items by alphabetical order. Knowing that this is going to be a long video, I wanted to try and just keep it alphabetical order, make things simpler on my end, on your end, and we go from there. There are some outliers, but we'll get to those as we cross those bridges. First and foremost, I want to actually start with what a hold item even is, because you're wondering, well, every single item can be held by a Pokemon. Aren't those hold items? No, that is not the case. And originally I was going to organize them all in a different method, but I find it to be a better form of organization in this case by simply just going in relative alphabetical order through the use of the list hosted on Cerebi.net. Thank you to the people who made that list. You made this so much easier on me. So if I miss anything, I could defer it to them and not having it on their lists. Yeah, let me just drop blame like that. Now, for sake of organization, as I go through every single item, I will state each item's name, give the mechanical in-game use of the item, where it's first seen, what Pokemon might hold it, lore behind it, other interesting info, how it connects to the real world, so on and so forth, and then we will move on to the next item. So, let's actually begin with the definition for the hold item as per Cerebi.net. In-games are a variety of items that give your Pokemon added perks if they have these items attached. Each item has different effects, some affecting the Pokemon status condition, some boosting stats, and some powering up moves. Some of these items are gone if used in battle, while others will remain no matter how many battles the Pokemon is in. So, allow us to begin with the first item, Ability Shield. Ability Shield prevents the holder's ability from being changed or suppressed by any effect, even if the effect is directly caused by the holder, such as the abilities Roleplay or Trace. It also protects the holder from effects that ignore abilities. For instance, if a Pokemon with Clear Body is holding an Ability Shield, and a Pokemon with Mold Breaker uses Leer, its defense will not be lowered. The item can really only be found by buying it in Delibird Presents in Scarlet and Violet and Mesagosa, as it only exists in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. In-game, it is actually described as an item to be held by a Pokemon. This cute and rather unique-looking shield protects the holder from having its ability changed by others. Any lore on this item is simply speculation on my end, as Mesagosa is the central of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet games, and as such, it only makes sense that there are these new students seeking out their personal treasures that would be encouraged and exposed to rare items that can help them in their long-term journeys. I couldn't find a link from this item to other notable shields in the Pokemon franchise, and the design of the shield is simple, just being a shield with a gradient. There is a sparkle in the center, but overall, no other information can be derived here. Absorb bulbs are first seen in Pokemon Black and White. Their most recent iteration states an item to be held by a Pokemon. This single-use bulb boosts the special attack if the holder is damaged by a water-type attack. There are wild Pokemon that do hold this item. The list includes Oddish, Gloom, Vileplume, Blossom, Cottony, Whimsicott, Petalil, Lilligant, and in the past, Roselia and Roserade had the chance to hold it, but it doesn't in games after Black 2, White 2. Now, clean and dry, this all comes from, or where this bulb derives from, is simply from Pokemon that are bulbed in their seeded form, with exception to Roselia, holding it in the past, as roses actually grow from roots, or roots if you don't want to say it the way I say it, because accents are a thing. And if we look at the rest of them, radishes can grow as fat little bulbs or seeds depending on the temperature, which is why you have Oddish. You have cotton balls, which they technically can be considered a bulb of sorts, as the round, fluffy clumps in which cotton forms and grows on a cotton plant can be described as a bulb. And then lilies are very much grown from bulbs. We have our first legendary hold item already as we look at the Adamant Crystal, an item to be held by Dialga. This large glowing gem wells with power and allows the Pokemon to change form. This item changes Dialga's form between its standard form and the origin form, and as of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it is required to be held by Dialga in order to change its forms, and also boosts the power of Dragon and Steel-type moves of the user by 20%. It's first seen in Pokemon Legends Arceus, but it's also in Scarlet and Violet, and with Pokemon Legends Arceus, you get it at Lake Valor for defeating Adamant in the rescue quest, or you can just win it in an auction apparently in Scarlet and Violet. So you could just pay $20,000 Pokebucks right out the back end in order to get something as legendary as this item that no one of the modern age probably would actually know exists or know about it, especially in these areas, considering it's a legendary Pokemon that's, probably considered a myth to them of sorts. Anywho, overall, it is fairly simple as it allows Dialga to turn into its origin form, which it's believed to take when it's in its own realm. It can also be said or believed that the reason why Dialga, Palkia both take on their origin forms and they look so similar to Arceus is because being created by Arceus, there's a theory that by mimicking its form, they are able to derive more power similar to that of their creator by mimicking said form. A very interesting concept all in all, and I think it's something that we see in other forms of literature. This item can also be directly translated to the Great Diamond Orb, and to make things easier, this means that this specific item, the Adamant Crystal, is more than likely the full pure form of the Adamant Orb, which provides the same effects as Dialga, but doesn't change its form that is originally found in the Pokemon Diamond game, and is required in Platinum in order to actually encounter Dialga. Air Balloon. Really simple, but I'm going to make it complicated in a moment. So it's first seen in Pokemon Black and White. It's an item to be held by a Pokemon that makes the holder float in the air, and if they're hit with an attack, the balloon will burst. By floating in the air, you're not susceptible to ground-type attacks. And of course, because of that, it's best used with Pokemon that are weak to ground-type moves. So the only wild Pokemon that actually holds it in Black 2, White 2 is Drifblim, which is a balloon in of itself, which is also really strange because there are Drifloon balloons in the Scarlet Violet games, which makes me really uncomfortable considering they carry children away. But there are event Pokemon that do hold on to it, examples being Zorora, Simisear, Pikachu, and Apollyon. Now, I'm not going to always state every single event Pokemon that holds on to the item because it may not have significance to the lore and may just be a competitive thing or just something that somebody did and won a championship with, so on and so forth. So I don't want to bog this video down and make it longer with unnecessary irrelevant information that does not build on what I'm trying to put together here. But speaking of relevant, irrelevant information, it is a balloon. So, because this balloon can hold Pokemon up from the ground, any Pokemon for that matter, we're gonna do the math. With Pokemon like Cosmoem and Celesteela being the heaviest Pokemon in the entirety of Pokemon's history, weighing at 999.9 kilograms or 2,204.4 pounds, we need 16 cubic feet of helium, which will lift roughly 1 pound. If you do the math on that, we need a balloon that would hold 35,270.4 cubic feet of helium at minimum for the average Cosmoem or Celesteela. I say average because we are confirmed to have multiple of these Pokemon, which means they could weigh more or less. Now, with your average air balloon, as I quote from balloonrides.com, about 55 feet across and 60 to 80 feet tall is the average balloon, categorized by how much air the envelope can contain. A common size is the AX7 with an envelope volume of 77,000 cubic feet. So, half the size of an air balloon would be fine, I suppose, when you're trying to lift up these two Pokemon. Z-Crystals. Yes, this is out of alphabetical order because I'm pretty sure there was a Pokemon that started with A that has a Z crystal, so alphabetical order just got thrown out the window, and there are other examples of this later on, but this is how we're going, and this is one of the examples of the out of order organization. So, In the Alola region, Z crystals play an important role in the Island Challenge. They provide proof of completing trials and grand trials, much like the gyms badges and other regions, of course, though not all Z crystals are obtained in this manner. Similar to Sparking Stones, which are found throughout the Sun and Moon games, and are then crafted into Z rings, Z power rings, Z crystals are also pieces of Necrozma that had chipped off and traveled to Alola through the Ultra wormholes between the dimensions. Z crystals themselves are described as crystallized forms of Z power. Now, an interesting piece of information is that the original design was in a 3D shape that would seemingly encase a small version of the Pokemon it was intended for in special cases. So if you look at the Z crystal for Pikachu, instead of simply having like the Pikachu face on it or some sort of symbol that's supposed to represent the Pokemon, you would have a full 3D crystal that would have a small Pikachu or that Pokemon in it. Overall, these were the gimmick for Generation 7, as I'm sure you already know, and allowed every Pokemon the opportunity to unleash one powerful move per battle, making it so that way your lovely little Rowlet could just get decimated by one of God's most powerful strikes of judgment. So now we move on to the Amulet Coin. I don't know why I started using an accent, but here we are. So with the Amulet Coin, it is an item to be held by a Pokemon. It doubles any prize money received as long as the holder joins the battle at least once. I think I'm thinking of Meowth, and even though it's not the exact accent for Meowth, that's probably why I'm doing it. I'm gonna stick with it. Now, it was first seen in Pokemon Gold and Silver, and is often associated with Meowth. I lost the accent. It's often associated with Meowth because of the coin that's on his forehead. The coin is shown in the anime and is considered a good luck charm there. Now, Meowth itself is often associated and based on the Maneki Neko, which is known as the Lucky Cat or the Beckoning Cat. The coin it holds is the Koban, an ancient coin in Japan. What I never heard, though, is really cool, and is, according to one legend, the reason why this cat is considered a good luck charm is because there was a cat that raised its paw to welcome a lord, and when that lord approached this individual, it saved this lord's life, because as they walked away, boom, a lightning bolt just hit the exact spot where this guy was standing. So, immortalized this cat was as the lucky cat to bring good fortune, and resulted in creating Meowth and this amulet coin. Moving on to the Assault Vest. When held by a Pokemon, it increases the special defense stat by 50%, but requires the Pokemon to only use damaging attacks. This item is first seen in Pokemon X and Y. Now, there's no extra info, but in the end, it is an Assault Vest. In the case of, now we're gonna go into war again, here I am, talking about war in a Pokemon video once more. In the case of Normandy 1944, these were issued in limited numbers to troops of the 1st, 4th, and 29th Infantry Divisions, as well as the 2nd Ranger Battalion. They proved hot, heavy, and impractical, and it appears that most had been discarded, quote-unquote, lost, within a month of the landings. In other words, you might have every tool you need to actually go after your enemy and deal with the opposing force, but because of its impracticability, it had to be left behind and ultimately just made you a weaker individual, which is probably why the Assault Vest in the games removes any ability outside of attacking in terms of movesets, but also raises your special defense. I don't think Assault Vests were ballistic, but I couldn't find anything that says otherwise. I don't know firearms in depth, nor war stuff in depth itself. This is the second time that war has become relevant in a Pokemon video once again. Sweets are items that came into Pokemon games Sword and Shield and come in 7 different varieties: Strawberry, Love, Berry, Clover, Flower, Star, and Ribbon. They are a shaped sweet that when a Milcery holds it, it spins around happily. This inadvertently causes the evolution of Milcery into Alcremie. Now, they did have an appearance in the anime. Specifically, a strawberry sweet first appeared in the Sweet Taste of Battle, decorating a cupcake that Goat was eating. When his newly caught Milcery showed interest in it, he placed it on her head and then spun around with her to celebrate making a new friend, inadvertently triggering her evolution into Alcremie in the process. There are 4 sweets that also appear in the flashback in Bittersweet Truth. Murdoch's Milcery grabbed one of them, spun around with it, and triggered the evolution as well. Now, it's very simple. Milk into cream with flavoring, though it begs the question, how did Milcery evolve into, Alcremie before humans? Because these are sweets. They're not just like, oh, it's a strawberry. No, it's a strawberry sweet. So I'm a little curious about how that works. Could just be a case where the evolution didn't exist until humans came around, though. Here's one that I think is really cool. Because it's an item that I didn't realize actually existed. It is the Berserk gene. First and only seen in Pokemon Gold, Silver, and it's also in Crystal, to be fair. Though the description of this item states the following. This item confuses the holder and raises their attack by 2 stages. The Berserk gene disappears after use, so it is consumed. Now, it's found in Cerulean City, and Mewtwo is defined to always hold one when encountered in the wild. But here's the thing, you can't encounter Mewtwo in the wild, so it's just unused data. And even if it could be encountered in the wild, you can't actually get the Berserk gene from Mewtwo because Mewtwo consumes it immediately at the start of battle. Now, what makes this more interesting is that this specific item was referenced in the Detective Pikachu movie as part of the drug known as R, which made the Pokemon more powerful, but then caused them to go berserk. Honestly, a genuinely amazing pull, and I wasn't aware of this reference until I read the articles and everything I could around this. So I like that movie. It's such a good movie. I mean, did you see the giant Torterras? I'm not gonna go on a massive rant, but tell me your favorite part in that movie. It's so good. Big Roots. Why is that funny to me? Big Root is first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. When this item is held by a Pokemon, if it uses the moves Absorb, Aqua Ring, Drain Punch, Draining Chaos, Dream Eater, Giga Drain, Horn Leech, Ingrain, Leech Life, Leech Seed, Mega Drain, Oblivion Wing, or Parabolic Charge, the HP it recovers is increased by 30%. The Big Root also increases the damage taken by the holder from Liquid Ooze. Now, it is only found naturally on Lileep and Cradily. Now, it is an old massive root, primarily originating from them potentially. Very interesting that it's not actually found naturally in any other Pokemon. Because with it being a really big root, it has to take a lot of time for it to right into the ground. You just don't get big roots from things like that easily. Lileep and Cradily actually root themselves deeply into the ground and feast on any fish Pokemon that comes swimming on by past them, and with its big, strong roots, they can just attach themselves basically anywhere and just gone. Bye-bye, Nemo. The Binding Band is first seen in Pokemon Black and White, which causes binding moves used by the holder to inflict binding that deals damage equal to 1/6 rather than 1/8 of the target's maximum HP at the end of each turn. I'm going to restate that because I took 4 tries to actually say that out loud. So when you use a binding move like Bind or Constrict, instead of it dealing 1/8 of the damage from the total HP, it deals 1/6 of the opponent's total HP as damage. Interestingly, it is only found naturally on the event Pokemon Beware. This is probably because Beware is shown to really like hugs, so it just kind of constricts and binds you. It's really strange that we don't see it on other Pokemon, such as Ekans, Arbok, even though they're more poisonous snakes, Seviper, even though it has a tail, Sandaconda. That's a constrictor snake Pokemon. There we go. Now, the shape of it is like the loop in a figure 8 style, which is based on the Mobius strip, which is important in mechanical machines. Now, it does have several curious properties. It is a non-orientable surface, asymmetrical, 2-dimensional object which slides one time around the strip. It returns to its starting position as its mirror image. So essentially, as one end is going out and around, it's coming back through in this continuous figure 8 pattern, and it never really has to stop. As such, though, it is impossible to consistently define what it means through its movement to be clockwise or counterclockwise, and it is the simplest non-orientable surface. Any other surface is non-orientable if and only if it has a Mobius strip as a subset. Big ol' mechanical thing. If you're a weeb, you've probably seen this in JoJo's at some point. I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not gonna, but it's pretty cool. Black Belt is super easy, first seen in Pokemon Gold and Silver. When this item is held, any fighting type move used by the holder has its power increased by 20%. Found naturally on Makuhita, Throw, and Sock. Black belts are typically worn by someone who has reached the highest level of Judo, Karate, and other appropriate martial arts. well, Makuita is sumo, throw and sock, you're looking at karate, jiu-jitsu, definitively depending on which one you're looking at. So it makes sense. Plus, they kind of do have, or at least throw and sock, have the actual black belt around their waist. Black glasses are first seen in Pokemon Gold and Silver. When this item is held, any dark type move used by the holder has its power increased by 20%. Now, it's found naturally on Sandile line, starting in Sword and Shield. There are two reasons why this could be, as it could be from simply the line looking like it wears sunglasses or shades, or to the fact that in the anime, Ashes wore glasses as well. The event Pancham that was distributed also wears black glasses, which is just a reference to the fact that Serena's Pancham wears black glasses in the anime. Overall, though, these literally are just sunglasses, so there's no extra real-life lore going on here. Black Sludge is first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. When this item is held by a Pokemon, if the holder is of the poison type, it restores 1/16 of its maximum HP each turn. If the holder is not a poison type, it loses 1/16 of its maximum HP each turn. So, it's found naturally on Grimer, Muk, their Alolan forms, Croagunk, Toxicroak, Trubbish, Garbodor, in the various games. Now, Koga does have a Muk with this item, and Biker Dale has a Gulpin with this item. They're all poison types, so it makes sense. There was also a special case of a live action with Chief Golgo, who had a Sableye with Black Sludge and the move Trick, built with the Prankster ability. So this Sableye would jump out, and this was like a real life event, like play kind of, I don't know, drama type thing. I don't know how exactly to describe it. Someone could probably do it better than I can. But the Sableye would jump on out, look around like the little Stitch monster that it is, realize that it has this item. Oh no, if I hold on to this, it hurts me. I don't want to drink the bone-hurting juice. How about you have it? And use this trick, and that switches items between you and your opponent, so now they have the bone-hurting juice, or rather Black Sludge. Now, if we relate this to real life, Black Sludge, depending on the makeup, has the following description. Not only is the toxic sludge dangerous and toxic for humans, it also makes large regions uninhabitable for fish and other wildlife, destabilizing entire ecosystems in its path. It's very rare, but happens in Europe and North America, which, when we combine it all together, it makes a lot of sense why poison Pokemon hold it, but only why specific Pokemon such as Grimer, Muk, and their lines naturally have it, considering that they are born from like the toxic filth areas where, well, Black Sludge would originate from in real life. We've got another doozy here with the Blue Orb. As first seen in Pokemon Ruby Sapphire, this item has different uses depending upon the game in which you are playing. In Sapphire, this item awakens Kyogre in the Cave of Origin. In Heart Gold, this item allows Kyogre to appear in the embedded tower. In Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, when held by Kyogre, it will cause it to become Primal Kyogre as soon as it is sent into battle. Also, bear with me, honestly, this is probably going to be a better video to have as like a background thing. There's only so many visuals I can have for this, and I do have to read these mechanics at verbatim to ensure that I'm giving you the correct information, because I'm not going to lie to you. It's fun and really easy for me to memorize a lot of different types of information, but when it comes to specific statistics of items, that becomes way harder, and it's just way easier for me to just tell you straight out. So, hopefully you're enjoying this so far, and I'm going to continue talking about the Blue Orb. Now, you can go through the games, know that the Blue Orb is capable of protecting the player in the Cave of Origin, reversing the process of Primal Reversion, calms the awakened Groudon, and when you reach the cave, you put on the Magma Suit, use this Blue Orb, and then you get a nice blue aura to protect yourselves from the heat and everything around you. Now, in the manga, it does go over the entire final fight with Ruby and Sapphire. Pretty cool all in all. Macy and Archie get taken over by the orbs, they use meteor energy to go ahead and free them, and then the orbs get absorbed by our main characters, Ruby Sapphire. They then find out that Kyogre and Groudon's whole shtick and their true potential can't be unleashed unless there is a bond with a trainer. Now, the risk of taking in this orb for yourself and creating that bond and trying to control these Pokemon, which is what these orbs had the potential of doing if you took in the orb instead of them taking in the orb directly, is that you run the risk of being controlled. it's kind of like a battle of wills between you and the Pokemon. From there, they really just extract the orbs from their bodies, and as Norman arrives with Rayquaza, they're able to calm down the other 2 legendary Pokemon and return them to their slumber. There is also the Emerald arc, where it is revealed that those who have touched the orbs and absorbed it into their body end up having nightmares about people who had previously been hosts for these orbs. And the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire arc, Oris, a Hoopa was manipulated into summoning Kyogre and Groudon, who then fused with the orbs and then became their primal forms. If you don't realize just how bad that is, I want you to know that, yes, Kyogre is able to just summon torrential downpours and expand the water, but by having its orb, I think it, expands the oceans by 10 feet or some ridiculous amount every couple of seconds or minutes, which is absolutely ridiculous, meaning that once one of them wins and you don't stop them, the entire planet is very much going to be taken over within a day of pure water or desolate land. Scarves are first seen in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, and they basically state when this item is held by a Pokemon, when in a contest, the holder's stat is increased. The stat depends on which scarf is being worn. Red for cool, blue beauty, pink cute, green clever, yellow for tough. See, I have a whole, not even gonna lie to you, I have a whole paragraph of how to explain this in the document, and I'm just gonna explain it this way. Your Pokemon's looking real cool, right? And it's got the cool scarf, right? Fantastic. You know what? You get a flat increase of 20 in the contest. Unless you're looking at some of the other shows, which gives you a percentage increase of 10%. You better make sure you're looking at your numbers, and depending on which game you're looking at, kid. And then when we look at the manga, we're looking at the fact that before competing in the Master Rank contest, Ruby, who was given all 5 scars, which he used to enhance the respective conditions of all 5 of his Pokemon, leading all of them to win the contest and fulfilling Ruby's part of the 80-day challenge with Sapphire. He then used the blue scarf to enhance Fifi's beauty. Honestly, they're just stylish bands or scarves that you would just see in real life. Moving forward with Blunder Policy, which is first seen in Sword and Shield. This item, when held, boosts a Pokemon's speed by 2 stages if a move that is used misses due to its accuracy. Very straightforward with no crazy lore, as it's simply a written policy for a stupid or careless mistake. Though, when I look at the locations of where it's found when creating combinations with the Cramomatic, in Freezington where excavation is happening, and then in Battle Tower, and then Scarlet Violet in Mazagosa. These are all areas where you could expect a mistake to happen, whether you like it or not, because you are learning, or it is simply a line of work in which a policy you would want to have in place just in case, so that way you can differentiate between a genuine mistake and a careless one, because John decided that he wanted to have a 5 pints glass of orange juice without a lid near the nuclear reactor controls. Thank you very much, John. Goodbye, Springfield. It's also funny because the Blunder Policy raises the speed of the Pokemon after the mistake, which could just be natural for a human being to do. You make a mistake and sometimes your immediate reaction is to pause, and then you immediately speed up what you're doing in order to cover up or fix the thing, or then clean up the mess and then work faster so that you catch up to what you did by accident. Booster Energy first appears in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. This item will boost the highest stat of a Pokemon with the ability Protosynthesis or Quark Drive, found in the Zero Lab on any of the naturally occurring non-legendary Paradox Pokemon. Protosynthesis is a pun on photosynthesis, but proto means first, foremost, or the earliest form of. So this translates to earliest form of synthesis by the union of chemical elements, groups, or simpler compounds in this specific case, which isn't really simple when I describe it that way, and it's a complicated explanation. Oh well. And then when we look at Quark, for Quark Drive, a quark is one of the most basic forms of matter that make up the heavier elementary particles. Atoms are made up of smaller particles, protons, neutrons, and electrons, and then some of which are made up of even smaller ones called quarks. So ultimately, this item is just a shot of energy for the appropriate Pokemon that apparently biological Pokemon and cyborg Pokemon can use. And yes, I do say cyborg Pokemon because apparently we have to assume they're cyborgs due to the fact that Iron Jugulis, or however you say its stupid name, in its Pokédex entry states that it was rumored to come into existence from the love between a Hydreigon and a machine. Robot dragon that typically just eats everything. It's a classic love story, I guess. He's a quirky guy that destroys everything he touches. She's an unfeeling machine that has learned to love. Check it out this summer. You know, I have like a script that I'm supposed to relatively follow, and then the brain kicks in, and I just have to say those. Bright Powder, first seen in Pokemon Gold and Silver. This hold item raises the holder's evasion by 10%. It is found naturally on Wurmple, Volbeat, and Illumis. Now, while Volbeat and Illumis make sense to my brain, considering they are lightning bugs that, you know, flash their light, and because of their size and what they are, being Pokemon, they could just, you know, blind you, hit you with that solar flare, you know? But, ultimately, Wurmple was a strange choice, and the closest I could find to explaining this was the fact that the Pipevine Swallowtail larva that it's based on states all host plants for the Pipevine Swallowtail have some form of aristolochic acids, wow, which the larva sequesters while they feed. These acids are passed onto future egg, pupa, and adult butterflies, so over generations, the level of acid in the body of the butterflies rises as the acid accumulates. High levels of acid make the larvae and adults unpalatable to bird predation. The bright orange spots present on larvae and adult butterflies are thought to serve as warnings to predators, alerting them to the potential bad taste should a predator decide to make a meal out of the swallowtail. Bright colors to dissuade predators, bright powder. It's a stretch, but it might be the only link that I can find. Gems are first seen in Pokemon Black and White. Yes, this is another one out of alphabetical order, because of Bug Gem. This item, when attached to a Pokemon, raises the power of the appropriate move by 50% when a move of that type is used. It is a one-use item. Now, as a Pokemon X and Y, the increase has been reduced to 30%. And it isn't consumed if the attack misses. In Pokemon Black, White, Black 2, and White 2, all these 17 existing gems can be found in dust clouds. In Pokemon Black 2, White 2, every gem can also be found in the location in the overworld in addition to those dust clouds. Dust clouds can, like I said, be found on the overworld. They are not like actual clouds in the sky. They are literally dust clouds on the ground, like, you know, Pigpen, Peanuts kicking up the dirt and all that stuff. Or underground in the mines. Now, in the anime, a dragon gem appeared in A Connoisseur's Revenge, where it was offered to Iris and her Axew by a Pokemart clerk. She passes it up as she feels it may be too early for it. In addition, a fire gem makes a brief appearance in Climbing the Tower of Success as one of the search items for the Wishing Bell Festival scavenger hunt. They are clearly valuable items, as in both of these scenarios are kind of shown off to be like, oh, it's rare. Oh, it's in this beautiful case where it's beautifully presented to you for you to buy. And it's sold by connoisseurs. Now, it can also be dug up from the ground and are still just a one-time use in the anime most likely, and are probably just seen as an emergency item. Another one out of order because of burn memory, but we have the memories, memory drives, memory disk, which is first seen in Sun and Moon. This item, when held by Silvally, will cause it and its multi-attack move to become the appropriate type. In the anime, memories are regularly used by Gladion in order to give his Silvally a type advantage over its opponents during battles, or otherwise give it benefits outside of the battles, such as when he turned Silvally into a steel type to allow it to cross the poison lake Nihilego had created without taking any damage. The rock memory also appeared in Destroy, Results of the Training, where Moon chose to insert it into the RKS system of Gladion Silvally in the manga in order to more effectively battle against Ryuki's Turtonator. Now, remember that Silvally is the man-made Frankenstein meant to copy Arceus itself through the ability to change types with the RKS system. Silvally can't just simply change types on will on its own, as it requires the assistance of another individual that it has bonded with, and in the case of the series, it was Gladion who would install, as it stated, a type into Silvally. I also realized I said burn memory. I meant bug memory. I'm just going to say that here now just to have that resolved, because I did mix that up with the burn drive, which is first seen in Pokemon Black and White. This item, when attached to Genesect, will change Genesect's signature move Techno Buster to be the appropriate type, which would be electric, fire, ice, or water, and there are a number of ways that they are acquired. From the lab that it was made in, a hiker that received the plans from a Unova acquaintance that made the drives himself, a street thug that got them through a shady market, talking to Colress after becoming champion, or a man in a bargain shop if you have Genesect in your party. In the anime, it isn't shown that the drives can be removed, but it is implied in the Pokemon Adventures manga. The reason is as Colress switches the drive itself. I won't talk about Genesect in depth here, as I have a whole other video that I want to work on that is going to cover all the ancient Pokemon and fossil Pokemon, and that's a whole other ballgame in and of itself. So it's just important to note that there are multiple Genesect, and they're created from a 300 million year old fossil and were altered to have a cannon attached to their back. Cockroaches are also 300 million years old, so that's fun. Now is a great time for me to tell you though, if you want to support videos like this, which does take hours upon hours of doing research that I genuinely do enjoy, because there's some information in here that I would not have known if I didn't start doing this research and found things that I can't find in the wiki normally through extrapolation of information and making these conclusions. In addition to future videos, such as the rise and fall of fossil Pokemon that I will be working on, or other theory videos, or scientific explanations of Pokemon, so on and so forth, all these deep dives, please subscribe, especially if you made it this far and you're not subscribed. In addition, if you wish, you can also become a member of the channel for as low as $3, which helps support the channel in a very small but effective way. $3 a month provides you with emotes that you can use on the channel in the comments or in streams, in addition to seeing videos up to a week early. So before I continue, once again, thank you so much for continuing to watch. Thank you for subscribing, and I highly recommend you check out my other content, my Supercuts playlist, which has narrations and full games cut down to an hour long, or even me reacting to the Pokemon series, as I should be continuing on that, or come say hi to me in the streams. Now, let's continue. I realized how long this video was really going to be, and I didn't want to do what I did last time, so you're probably going to see some level of visual changes in the scenery just a little bit, or how I look. I'm going to just keep wearing the same shirt whenever I record this, just for sake of continuity, but you might notice some other things because I might have gone to bed, or I may be streamed. The Cell Battery is first seen in Pokemon Black and White. This item, when attached to a Pokemon, causes the Pokemon's attack to rise when hit by an electric attack. It is a one-time use. Found naturally on Chargebug, Alolan Geodude line, Plusle, and Minun. Now, all of these can be representative of batteries in some capacity. Geodude, being the Alolan one, is magnetic, and they can hold their charge as a golem for their railgun. Then you have Minun and Plusle being the positive and negative forms or ends of a battery. And then you have Beep Beep Bust Chargebug being based on a 9-volt battery, literally being called the battery Pokemon. It basically acts like a recharge battery, which is all related to osmosis. Essentially, electrons are negatively charged and so are attracted to the positive end of a battery and repelled by the negative end. So when the battery is hooked up to something that lets the electrons flow through it, they flow from negative to positive. Now, when it passes through like that barrier inside, what happens is that helps create the charge for the item. When the battery is balanced, there's not enough electrons actively moving through the barrier anymore. I would say that there aren't any, but that's not realistic. There would be some at all times, but not enough to hold a charge. This is also why you can take a battery, I wish I had one, kinda, and you can just kind of, oh, I can do this, hold on. This is why, like, pretend my marker is a battery. So you could take a battery and kind of just drop it like this, and if it falls over, then it's more than likely balanced and dead, quote unquote. Now, rechargeable batteries, what they will do, and this really only works like AA, AAA, so on and so forth in terms of doing that trick, but when you have a rechargeable battery, basically, without getting into all the nitty-gritty of it, it just imbalances the negative and positive electrons that are inside of it, pushes it all to one side again, back to the negative, so that way you could use it again. Charcoal, some of these items, I swear, they're so simple, but they still have like lore and everything to them. But charcoal is first seen in gold and silver. When this item is held, any fire type move used by the holder has its power increased by 20%. Charcoal appeared in a far-fetched tale in the anime while traveling through Ilex Forest. Ash and his friends met a boy named Sylvester, who was trying to follow his teacher's footsteps in order to learn how to make purifying charcoal. Brock explained that purifying charcoal is actually burnt wood, which can be used as fuel to purify water and air. At the end of the episode, Ash and his friends receive some charcoal as a gift, very much similar to when we first go through Ilex Forest in the games. So, I mean, it's literally exactly what you expect. You make charcoal, you know, you do your little Minecrafting, you go punk, and then you take your wood, burn it, and then you get charcoal, however the heck you're burning it or otherwise. Now, Entei is also seen using charcoal in the Pokemon Adventures manga. There is a man in Lava Ridge Town that states that charcoal is used for making herbal medicine in game, however, it serves no medicinal purpose. Now, it is naturally found on Vulpix, Ninetales, Torkoal, and Turtonator. So, in the case of Vulpix and Ninetales, maybe the twig that they carry was burnt as it is a fire type, and real foxes might gnaw on twigs, primarily because they are like omnivores. Torkoal eats traditional coal as its main source of energy, and Turtonator releases poop that can be explosive. This might actually be a reference to coal mines of old, where with enough dust and everything in the air, amongst other minerals, chemicals, whatever else, naturally forming chemicals, that with the invisible debris or gases, an explosion would be possible. In addition, we can also support this as it does live in the caves of volcanoes, and that it eats sulfur and other minerals, which coal can have about 5 up to 5% sulfur. So if you use coal, when you buy your bag of coal, if you buy coal, I don't know anybody who does these days, but let's say you do buy coal, I guess for grilling, then you can actually look and see what the percentage is. It can be like as low as 0.5%, I think, unless they've gotten even lower than that. But honestly, the less sulfur, the better that's in your coal. And I don't really care for coal. There's a multitude of reasons why it's getting phased out as a fuel source, amongst other things that it's used for, and I'm just not going to go down that line right now. Let's move on to our choice band. When this item is being held, the user's attack is increased by 50%, but the Pokemon is limited to using the first attack it uses until it is withdrawn from battle. In the Pokemon Adventures Emerald arc, we see Emerald rented a Lanoon holding a choice band from the Battle Factory. In Pinsir Me, I Must Be Dreaming, oh god, all these puns. It was used to strengthen its frustration in some of its matches. This item later proved to be instrumental in taking down Nolan's Mawile when Lanoon used Trick to switch items with Mawile. There's other examples of it being used where it actually just, like, it caused the Pokemon just to use the one move, and I had to ask, alright, well, why is that the case? Well, the direct translation from the Japanese name would be Fixation Headband. Now, in relation, there are Choice Scarf and Choice Specs, which boost speed or special attack by the same percent in the respective order that I stated them. But those were first seen in Diamond and Pearl. And there is an example where a Wailord was given Choice Specs to hold, or Fixation Specs to hold, and through using Water Spout to defeat a Heatran, the opponent actually ended up throwing out a Quagsire that had Water Absorb, and the Wailord did not stop using Water Spouts. So they all cause something in the Pokemon to just hyper-fixate on this singular move. Fixation, or rather hyper-fixation as I ended up saying, is or involves dedicating one's time and attention to a single task or activity. Those in a state of hyperfixation may easily lose track of time, not hear others talking around them, and go about their day without recognizing surrounding sights or sounds. I'm not gonna lie to you, this is actually something that I do very often. This isn't like just for videos like this. When I finally am able to focus my brain and focus on something, then it's gone. Everything else, I forget to eat sometimes, and so on and so forth. I luckily have like pups. I have 2 dogs. So come say hi to them on stream. But I have 2 dogs, and because they get hungry and they're like, hey, it's food time, I can't say certain words, I know that I need to at least go ahead and make sure I feed myself as well, drink my water, so on and so forth. Like, even now, I don't realize how much I need water until I can feel my throat getting all scratchy in some capacity. Anywho, moving forward, without that external object or factor pushing my attention back, or away from this topic, then there's not there's not much I can really do. And if there's something like a fixation headband that would focus me harder onto the topic, I'm gone. There's no way that I can do anything else, and I cannot imagine being a Pokemon and having that happen to me. This is basically what these 3 items could essentially be taking advantage of and just doing. The Cleanse Tag was first seen in Pokemon Gold and Silver. If this item is held by the first Pokemon in your party, random wild Pokemon of a level lower than the holder will appear 2/3 less of the time from Diamond and Pearl through Omega, Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire, or 12.5% of the time in Sword and Shield. Not gonna lie to you, I always thought that the Cleanse Tag was just like a repel, and I started to not believe whatever it did. I should have done my homework and actually read it. Oh well, but it is naturally carried by Chimecho and Chingling, oddly enough. So Cleanse Tags have been seen all over Japanese media. They're a way of warding off evil spirits. They're actually called Ofuda, and they're talismans made out of things such as paper, wood, cloth, or metal. Now, they are found in Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples, and these Ofuda are imbued with the powers of the kami, gods/deities, or Buddhist figures revered therein. The reason why Chimecho and Chingling hold them is because Chimecho specifically represents a Japanese glass bell known as a furin, which are also hung around Shinto shrines to predict disasters and ward off evil spirits. They were originally created in the Edo period. I wanted to make sure I said that right, because you lovely people have been correcting me on things that I may or may not have gotten wrong, and I want to make sure that, because you guys are being polite about correcting me, that I am imbuing those corrections into future works. So thank you. The Clear Amulet is first seen in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. An item to be held by a Pokemon, this clear, sparkling amulet protects the holder from having its stats lowered by moves used against it or by other Pokemon's abilities. It looks like far too many things to my brain for me to just reliably trace any origins visually for its lore or otherwise. It is also directly translated as Clear Amulet as well, and is incredibly expensive at $30,000, whatever you want to call it, available only after getting 4 gym badges. It may just be considered a good luck charm in the future to the untrained eye, and I don't know. I want to attribute that it at least holds the same design as the Revive item, but with the extra embellishments on it. But that could just be basic design psychology and choice that aligns with what we are already aware of and we already know, because we have associated the Revive symbol in Pokemon to be a positive symbol since its first creation, and because of that, if you create anything that has a similar shape or color or anything like that, then it's going to easily catch our attention, and we're often going to associate it with a positive thing right off the bat without even having to read whatever the description is. Dragon Fang was first seen in Pokemon Gold and Silver. When this item is held, any Dragon-type move used by the holder has its power increased by 20%. It is found naturally on the Bagon line, Dragonair, Dragonite, and Druddigon. Also with the event Pokemon Rayquaza, Garchomp, Salamence, Altaria, and Flygon. In Pokemon Gold and Silver, the player must collect a Dragon Fang in Dragon's Den in order to receive the Rising Badge from Claire. If the Dragon Fang from Dragon's Den is not obtained, but the player has one anyways, usually from trading from another trainer, Claire will call the player a cheater and refuse to give the badge. I didn't even realize that was really possible, to just be an absolute disgusting dirty cheater that early on, which is kind of funny. I don't know why I put so many connotations on that. I don't know why that was so insulting. Didn't really need to be, but a Dragon Fang also appeared in Beauty is Skin Deep as a treasure of Claire's family kept in Blackthorn Gym. It's the fang of an ancient dragon that terrorized Blackthorn, and is part of a ritual with the purpose of bringing peace to all Dragon-type Pokemon. It involves the Blackthorn Gym Leader placing it on a special ceremonial table, pouring water over it, and then it causes a dragon of light to kind of just boom out of it, rise into the sky, and then assumedly it becomes, or the legend says, that it becomes a star and watches over all Dragon-type Pokemon. Looking at all the Pokemon that exist in that time, in the Gold, Silver era, ignoring future Pokemon, we don't know who that specific dragon that went on an absolute rampage was, and We could make some assumptions if we want to, but nothing is confirmed. So, allow me to make some of those assumptions, because there's not a lot to choose from, and the legend could just be told as, that's it, just a legend. It could not be 100% accurate, but we know that if a Dragonite is mistreated or its land is ruined in some capacity, then Dragonite, when pushed to that limit, go on an absolute berserk rampage until nothing is left behind. Hence why their signature move is Outrage. Or at least it used to be, and then, pretty much every dragon type now can basically use Outrage. Nevertheless, we might be able to assume that the dragon of old that destroyed everything was a Dragonite. I'm excited to talk about this one because we're going to jump into Ogerpon's masks. Yes, again, out of order. Blame the Hearthflame mask, or whatever the heck the first letter of the first one is supposed to be at this point. The uses are derived from Ogerpon herself, each mask changing her type, giving a special terrestrial design, and providing different in-lore abilities, and yes, it was first seen in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. The teal mask doesn't necessarily really do anything, it just confounds the enemies with nimble movements and kicks as she's doing her stuff. The Wellspring mask unleashes moves like a spring gushes water. You have the Hearthflame, which bombards enemies with the intensity of flames, blazing with a hearth. Then you have the Cornerstone that can absorb impact solidly like the cornerstones that support houses. There is additional stuff there that evolve around like bringing life back to plants, restoring rivers, and all these other crazy things. And Ogerpon has this massive history and deep lore based on the games and in real life. Now, the masks are likely based off of the masks off of Nogaku Theater. Depending on which one you look at, you can see these similarities. Nogaku Theater is one of the traditional styles of Japanese theater. It is composed of the lyric drama No and the comic theater Kyogen. I know a little bit of No, only because of those thespian days. But they represent the grinning face of an old man for the teal, the female saddened face for the Wellspring, the fury of the lion for the Hearthflame, and the resolute, powerful deities to the Cornerstone mask, possibly even representing the 4 Oni that were summoned by a feudal lord who plotted high treason. Ogerpon can also not have its Terra type change as it relies upon the masks for them, making it impossible to be a Terra type and potentially separating it from the modern traditional Terra phenomenon. Now, I'm going to be real honest, Ogerpon is one of my top 3 favorite Pokemon, alongside my Gengar and Suicune / Walking Wake. Depending on my day, I think Walking Wake looks cooler than Suicune, but I'm a dinosaur boy, so who would have guessed? Now, I know a lot of other people have talked about Ogerpon theories, but I would actually genuinely love to be enabled by you to study more about Ogerpon, its origin, and its real-life counterparts to share with you, if you would enable that hyperfixation that's just scratching at my brain, and look into maybe even whatever the Peach Pit guy is. I don't even remember his name. He made my Ogerpon sad. He's really cool, so Pecharunt, there it is. Covert Cloak is first seen in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. This hold item protects the user from additional effects of moves, including trapping, status conditions, and more. This includes any stat drops and secondary effects, such as special attack drops from Snarl, status conditions, and every secondary effect. It is an item to be held by the Pokemon. The hooded cloak conceals the holder, tricking the eyes of its enemies and protecting it from the additional effects of moves, which is what its flavor text then states forth. Now, the direct translation for Covert Cloak is Covert Mantle. That doesn't really change anything, but cloaks are often seen in the media as exactly what this item serves its purpose for. Hiding the user from view, from prying eyes, and even when attacked, we so often see in anime or let's say in the movies, anything really, that when the person is attacked or someone else reaches for them to grab them, it's always the cloak that is removed first, burned up, destroyed, whatever you want to say. It's a classic style of revealing a villain or unexpected character, and is a trope that I guarantee is just never gonna go away. Now, there's no specific lore here outside of that, but we've also seen characters like Zinnia or Ghetsis wear cloaks that can hide their face alongside others throughout the entire series, I'm positive. Now we have the weather rocks, damp, heat, icy, and smooth rocks. first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. When this item is held by a Pokemon, if the holder uses the respective moves of Rain Dance, Sunny Day, Hail, Sandstorm, and all similar effects, so like if you have like Harsh, Sunlight, or whatever the heck else other moves create these effects, then the weather effect lasts 8 turns as opposed to 5 turns. Now apparently in Oris, the only one that has a very unique ability or other thing that you can do with it is actually the Icy Rock, which if it's held by a nicknamed Regice in the party, along with Regirock and Registeel, it allows you to spawn Regigigas in Island Cave, except at night or before defeating / catching Groudon or Kyogre. I don't know why you need to have the item with you as well when you already have the 3 Regis that you would typically need to go get Regigigas, but that is what was stated. I did not research that personally, but that is what information I was able to find. Now, Icy Rock is also an ingredient in some of the other spin-off games for cooking, and overall, these could just be considered a series of endothermic or exothermic rocks. Endothermic meaning that it absorbs heat from its surroundings, exothermic meaning that it releases heat into the surroundings. This could explain why the damp rock is forever covered in ice, Icy Rock has gems that absorbs enough heat to enhance the hailstorm, or the heat rock releases enough heat to enhance the move of Sunny Day. Smooth Rock does not follow this logic. It's not even smooth, it has jagged crystals coming out of it, honestly. Now, though, I can still relate this to real life, because Smooth Rock would make sense in the desert, because you would have a lot of smooth rocks formed through the weathering process. Now, to explain that, essentially, with no rain, it's drier in the deserts. Materials found there are exposed intensely to wind, which will weather the rock down as one of the primary forms of weathering. If it rains, it'll actually cause way more damage than it would anywhere else, because since it's so dry there, everything is already just barely holding together. You introduce another, material, I'm just going to say, that's not the right word, but we're going to say material, which then changes the friction and its ability to hold together, and because of that, you'll get entire sloughs of sand in the desert that get broken off and slide down. The water actually ends up weathering away at rocks rapidly and more alongside the wind. Now, I only know this because I did take geology, and when I was going to college, I got a nice bird's eye view of it, and I was going to minor in it, but now I just read whatever books I can get on it. Now we have the Deep Sea Scale and the Deep Sea Tooth, both first seen in Pokemon Ruby Sapphire. The Tooth to evolve Clamperl into Huntail and double Clamperl's special defense stat. It can also be found on Carvanha, Sharpedo, Huntail, and Basculin. This scale is to evolve Clamperl into Gorbis and double Clamperl's special attack stat. It can be found in Chinchu, Lantern, and Relicanth. All of these creatures, whether you're looking at the Deep Sea Scale or the Deep Sea Tooth, can be respectively associated with the item that are also deep sea creatures themselves. It's very straightforward, though. While Huntail might lure you in for, whatever reason, using its tail, you come in closer, go for a little nibble because you're hungry, and then it turns around and whoomp! There are creatures that do that in real life, and it's just a baiting tactic. I actually fear Gorbis more, as it will ensanguinate me, that's the word, by just drinking all my blood through its little needle mouth like it's a little silly straw, and I'm just some freaking juice box on the playground. That thing will destroy me. I will have no blood in my body. That little deep sea vampire needs to stay away from me. Destiny Knot. When this item is held by a Pokemon, if the holder becomes infatuated, the Pokemon it is attracted to also becomes infatuated. It is first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, and as of X and Y, when attached to a Pokemon while breeding, it will cause the baby Pokemon to inherit 5 IVs from its parents. Now, it was also, which is really cute, a little Valentine's Day gift distribution in 2023. Now, This is all based on the idea in Japan that everyone's pinky finger is tied to an invisible red string that will lead him or her to another person with whom they will make history. To read it more specifically, human relations are predestined by a red string that the gods tie to the pinky fingers of those who find each other in life. Legend has it that the two people connected by this red thread will have an important story, regardless of the time, place, or circumstances. The red string might get tangled, contracted, or stretched, as surely often happens, but it can never break. The pinky is also seen culturally often as a promise to one another across many cultures in the world. And honestly, this is easily the cutest item there is in Pokemon, as I'm a sucker for genuine romance, and it makes me feel a little emotional at times. Because what do you see as the Destiny Knot? It is a ball. It's all, tangled up and all over the place, but it's still together. And that's just adorable. Now we have a big one, because now we're going to talk about the Plates of Arceus, otherwise known as the Plates of Life. When the item is held, any corresponding type move used by the holder has its power increased by 20%. So, Flame Plate or Fire Plate if you're using a fire type move, Bug, so on and so forth. If given to Arceus to hold, it becomes that corresponding type. Arceus is known as the creator of all Pokemon God if you would, as it has been denoted that it is but a single arm of the 1,000 that make up the unknown and unnamed Pokemon progenitors. Now, there are currently 19 plates, one plate for every type in addition to the Legend plate. All of this is first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, and there are engravings throughout the plates that read the following. When the universe was created, its shards became this plate. The power of defeated giants infuses this plate. 2 beings of time and space set free from the original one. 3 beings were born to bind time and space. 2 make matter, and 3 make spirit, shaping the world. The original one breathed alone before the universe came. The powers of plates are shared among Pokemon. Like, very, very Old Testament type stuff, and I'm gonna be real, Arceus is the culmination of a lot of different religions and cultures, and Arceus and the origin trio and everything could get an entire, probably multi-hour video talking and explaining and going through their lore. Oh, I missed a quote, I'm sorry. And the last one is, the rightful bearer of a plate draws from the plate it holds. This one's like a page and a half of information that I have to parse through, so bear with me. Because the Legend plate, when in battle, Arceus uses Judgment, and the move type changes based on what the opponent's type is. So the game just does a little calculation, and it's like, oh, that's a bug. Hit it with fire or flying or whatever works best in the scenario. And the move will never turn into a normal type move for the Judgment automatically, because it's just not super effective against anything. Because whatever it is, it just wants to be super effective. Apparently it's similar to Unknown signature move, Hidden Power. Now, another description for one of the tablets is that it is a stone tablet imbued with the essence of all creation. When used on a certain Pokemon, it allows that Pokemon to gain the power of every type there is. The reason why they're also called life plates is because Arceus actually almost died. I don't know if that means like the actual OG deity or just simply one of the arms died, but nevertheless, Arceus almost died after destroying a meteor that would become Echidna Town, losing the plates in the process. They also might be related to the shards that you might find and dig up, which they could also be seen as ancient tools or broken pieces of other plates, which could explain why they are, you might have the 1,000 arms of Arceus, maybe there are 1,000 Arceus somewhere, maybe you could bring them together. I doubt that would ever happen. That'd be really cool if you could like catch 1,000 Arceus and see the original like Pokemon. That'd be pretty cool. Game Freak, do it. Anywho, the Diamond, Pearl, Platinum games are the only ones where you can get multiple of each plate though, which does support that in some capacity. And they do have 2 separate forms, one of them where it's a square or rectangle kind of thing, and the other one where it's a 6-angle shape. They're always found in places such as ruins, antique shops, desolate locations, deep sea locations, or under deep protection by incredibly powerful Pokemon such as mythicals or legendaries, denoting their importance in the world and its lore. Dubious Disc causes Porygon 2 to evolve into Porygon Z while holding it, and it consumes the Dubious Disc in doing so. In Arceus, you don't evolve it by holding it when trading, because you don't really do that. You just shove it down its throat and it consumes it, so there's that. It can be acquired north of a house, beyond a small lake that you acquire surf to get to the other end of, and then it's kind of nestled in between a bunch of trees. Now, Porygon Z's Pokedex entries imply that the dubious disc was modified in order to enable it to work in alien dimensions, but that an unplanned error in the programming corrupted Porygon Z and prevented it from fulfilling its purpose. Now, add that to the location where it's found, which seems like it was purposely placed there in order to hide it. Whoever did this was likely doing independent research or secret research in order to achieve the rumored goal. Having failed, it was hidden away in a location that they hoped would never be found. Why they didn't destroy it could be that they wanted to recreate it or create one that would work, or they intended to use it for nefarious means, considering the dubious part of its name. Could also just be dubious because it just messed everything up. Now, overall, we can't support these theories because it states, as a result, it is believed the experiment to create Porygon Z was a failure. This has been attributed to the incompetence of the engineer improperly updating its programming. Academics can't seem to agree on whether Porygon Z should be considered a true evolution of Porygon 2. And then if we look at Smash, the game franchise, this is the only time I'm probably going to do this, PAL states, Porygon is an artificial Pokemon created by humans. Given an upgrade, it becomes Porygon 2. Then another mod turns it into Porygon Z. You'd think 2 upgrades would make Porygon Z the perfect Pokemon, but actually the dubious disc used to make Porygon 2 evolve makes it a bit glitchy. Maybe there's a patch in the works. So, who knows, maybe one day we're gonna get a true Porygon, maybe Porygon A, probably not, let's be real here, but it'd be pretty cool, and they have the opportunity to actually create an alternate pure form of what Porygon's final intended evolution could be. Maybe it'll be a Mega. The eject button, first seen in Pokemon Black and White, is fairly straightforward and simple. The item, when attached to a Pokemon, allows the holder to escape battle if they're hit by an attack. It's, again, incredibly straightforward. It is literally just an eject button getting the Pokemon out of an emergency situation. Now, the same can be said about the eject pack, but the trigger for how that works is if the Pokemon's stats are lowered due to it doing it to itself, or if the opponent lowers its stats, or your stats rather. Now, it's first seen in Sword and Shield, specifically in the Crown Tundra on Snow Slide Slope. That feels like a tongue twister. So, it would make sense that a hiker in the more cold and dangerous snowy regions would have an emergency pack in case anything happens. They slap that button, gone. Now we have the Electrizer, which is first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, a box packed with a tremendous amount of electric energy that is loved by a certain Pokemon. Do you know who that certain Pokemon is? You're right, it's Electabuzz. So, it allows Electabuzz to evolve into Electivire if it's holding the item and you trade it. Now, the Elekid line is the only line of Pokemon that actually hold this item naturally, and it can be found first seen at the Valley Windworks, which is a windmill power station. This item could be related to a generator or power breaker with a ton of energy flowing out of it, allowing Electabuzz to hold more energy than it normally would be able to and force a sudden change. Alternatively, instead of just draining this generator of sorts of all of its energy, maybe it absorbs it. It's unknown. I know Electivire can produce a ton of energy seemingly freely with no issue, so maybe it became a part of their body. It's unknown. I'll allow you to pick your poison and what you would like to believe on that. Electric Seed, first seen in Sun and Moon, boosts the user's defense by 1 stage when electric terrain is activated and these seeds are consumed in the process. It is naturally found with Togedemaru, and Tapu Koko holds it as an event Pokemon. Oddly enough, there is a plant that is called Paracress, or nicknamed Electric Daisies, as when it is eaten, they leave a taste and tingling sensation reminiscent of electricity. Though, that plant is not native to Hawaii and is rumored or believed to be from Brazil. The other seeds, such as Grassy, Misty, and Psychic, respectively follow the same methods, effects, and their namesakes terrains. Grassy once being held by the Bunsweet line and events Tapu Bulu, Misty by Comfey and Event Tapu Fini, and then Psychic by Execute, Dottler, Orbeetle, and Event Tapu Lele. Each of these seeds follow the Tapu's signature moves that create the respective terrains as a secondary effect, likely hinting that due to the Tapu's influence on their guarded islands, that the vegetation in the area was changed by their influence and could then naturally grow these seeds. Everstones were first seen in Pokemon Gold and Silver. When this item is held by a Pokemon, it will be prevented by evolving by level up means. In Emerald, Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, if a female Pokemon or a Ditto holds this in the breeding center and breeds, there is a 50% chance of the offspring retaining the holder's nature. In Black 2, White 2, it's guaranteed. Now, if you use this with regional forms, what you can do is you can have your regional form and a normal form, or I guess you can't say normal, whatever. And depending on which one is holding the Everstone, it would allow the alternates to actually be bred from it, so that way you don't have to have two of the same Pokemon. You can have one of each and still get your preferred Pokemon. Now, it depends on which game you're looking at, so always double check into that. And if both parents hold an Everstone, the form will correspond to the female parent. And due to an oversight, Unova Stunfisk and Galarian Stunfisk, if they both hold Everstones, it'll always result in Unova Stunfisk offspring, regardless of the parents' genders. Now, it's naturally found on the Geodude line, the Rock and Roll line, and event Pokemon Shaman and Pichu. It is found in the main series with Piplup and Ash's Rowlet, even a Pancham for a little while before it decides, hey, I'm comfortable, I'm gonna evolve into a Pangoro now. There could be a series of theories as to how an Everstone relates to real life, one of them being that if you give a rock as a gift, it's representative of an unchanging, memorable gift, changing only minutely over years and years of weathering, which could translate to the idea of keeping the Pokemon the same, despite the outside influences over the years. Eviolite was first seen in Pokemon Black and White. When attached to a Pokemon that is capable of evolution, it will boost the Pokemon's defense and special defense by 50%. It is described as a mysterious evolutionary lump. It can be found in the northernmost building on the east side of the street, where there are full people on the ground, one of whom is a scientist who will give the player an Eviolite if they have seen enough Pokemon. So despite its seemingly natural origins that we would see as per its namesake of "ite" as its suffix for minerals, it may be an artificial rock or rock from beyond our planet. This can be supported by event Pokemon Porygon 2 and Clefairy having it. Its Japanese name is also a pun, as it can mean Evolution Stone or Miracle of Evolution, though in future generations or remakes of after X and Y, you don't necessarily get it from scientists, so it could be quite the mix as to where it's all coming from. Experience Share, an item to be held by a Pokemon, allows it to earn half the XP gained from defeating a Pokemon regardless of if it was used in battle or not. In X and Y, it is a key item that can be turned on or off, so that way the Pokemon receive 100% of the XP if they are in battle, 50% if they were not in battle. This one's fairly straightforward, going onto the head of the Pokemon, and is similar to real-life helmets that may be used to study brainwaves, though after conception, they may have just been based on science fiction, and it was originally obtained from one of the aides of Professor Oak. Afterward, they do come from other scientists or employees of scientific companies, with exception technically to Mr. Pokemon, because he's not really a he is a scientist, but he's not a scientist. He's someone that does research. So, I don't know. That's a weird gray area. Nevertheless, I used to think that when you gave a Pokemon the item itself to hold, wear, so on and so forth, that it would lower their happiness while they held it, but I couldn't find any definitive proof. I could have sworn I saw something in the games saying that Pokemon don't like to wear it, but unless I see something that explicitly states that it does lower happiness, I have to say that this is disproven, unless I see that concrete evidence otherwise. And you know what? I'm happy for it, because, you know, it makes me not feel bad for putting it on my Pokemon. The Expert Belt, first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. When this item is held, if the holder uses an attack on the opponent, which is super effective, its power is increased by 20%. Ultimately, it's a well-worn belt that slightly boosts the power of the holder's super effective moves, is what the flavor text says. I realize I have not described to you what flavor text is, and for those of you that may not know flavor text, it is essentially the description of the item that does not affect how the mechanics work. It could be like, hey, here's relevant story information. Oh, here's a description. Oh, here's some just fun, stupid thing. That's flavor text, okay? Now, think of like, if you know Yu-Gi-Oh, think of like the light brown cards versus the dark brown cards, as the light brown cards have like text on it that just describes or says stuff. Meanwhile, the dark brown cards are the monsters that have like the actual effect or additional effect attached to it. There you go. Now, Expert Belt, back to Pokemon, is naturally found on Throw and Sock, which wear black belts throughout their lives and train constantly on their own. Event Pokemon that hold it are, oddly enough, Gastrodon, Zoroark, and Samurott. I don't know. I could understand Samurott, maybe Zoroark. Gastrodon doesn't make any sense to me, so that's just really funny, and that's why I'm not including every single event mon all the time, because it's just not relevant to what the lore could be. But it is shown in Pokemon Adventures and has no additional lore there. Ultimately, it's just a worn down black belt from continual training. The Fairy Feather is first seen in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. This item increases damage inflicted by fairy type moves by 20%. This feather, which gleams faintly when hit by light, does that effect. That was flavor text. Only found via the Kitakami item printer. Design-wise, it reminds me of Togekiss's wing, but instead of it being like actual feathers from Togekiss, it's likely just designed after it, so it's just a nice little detail. The Flame Orb, first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. An item to be used by a Pokemon, it is bizarre! An orb that gives off heat when touched and will afflict the holder with a burn during battle. Found naturally on Heatmore and Black 2, White 2, and Faulkner's Swallow has it in Heart Gold, Soul Silver. Now, the reason as to why Heatmore might have it is because it has visual design elements from Ironworks, Heatmore does, so there is a chance of the orb representing hot coals or nuggets of iron that would need to be removed from the flame. Flowstones are another easy one for me to describe, as this item when attached to a Pokemon halves the Pokemon's weight for use with attacks that deal with weight. Now, it is also a very light stone as per its flavor text. It is first seen in Pokemon Black and White, and ultimately it's just a pun on actual float stones, which are a type of carbonate rock. The Focus Band. If this item is given to a Pokemon to hold and they are damaged by an attack that would knock it out, this item gives the Pokemon a 10% chance of preventing a knockout and keeping the holder at 1 HP. First seen in Gold and Silver and is naturally found on the Machop line. Now we do see it in the anime, as in The Journalist from Another Region, a Pokemon Sumo tournament was held during the Grand Harvest Festival on Harvest Island, with the prize for winning being a Focus Band. Eventually it was worn by Ash, who gave it to Pignite to wear as a trophy. And then in The Last Battle 6, Gold gave each of his team members a Focus Band to hold during the final battle against the Masked Man. Headbands in media have been seen quite a few times. The tightening of the cloth around the head before the final battle, we've seen it in JoJo, we've seen it in Dragon Ball Z, and who knows where else. I mean, it derives from somewhere, and Naruto wears, like, all the people in Naruto wear headbands all the time, so I mean, I'm positive there's at least one dramatic headband scene in there. Multiple, really. But I don't want to be a weeb, there's got to be stuff outside of anime, it's just what I've been exposed to. So, that's where the Focus Band idea could very well just derive from. Along the same lines, we have the Focus Sash. When this item is held by a Pokemon, if the Pokemon's at full HP and is hit by an attack that would knock it out, it prevents them from fainting and keeps it at 1. The Focus Sash then disappears after use. It was held by Darox Houndoom in getting the drop on Gallade 2, allowing it to survive a super effective Focus Blast by Platinum's Lopunny. And in the same chapter, Platinum was revealed to have rented a Focus Sash for her Empoleon to hold in the Battle Castle. Now, honestly, again, it's very similar to what I just talked about with the Focus Band story, but there are moments in media where it's not, if I remember correctly, it's not just Eastern media where someone might give a gift to somebody before they leave on a harrowing mission. I'm pretty sure I saw it in the Castlevania series, and this can range from sashes to handkerchiefs, but ultimately, no matter what it is, it's an item that, like, somebody, it doesn't have to be a romantic thing, walks up to the person and ties around, like, their wrist, maybe their finger, whatever it is, and it gives them a reminder of what they fight for and the promise to come back. And I have a feeling that's exactly what it references. Grip Claw. When this item is held by a Pokemon, if the holder uses the moves Bind, Wrap, Fire Spin, Clamp, Whirlpool, Uproar, Outrage, or Sand Tomb, the move will last 7 turns. It is first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, and naturally found on Sandshrew and the Sneasel lines. It very much looks like it's designed after their kinds of claws that they have, as the direct translation is Scythe Claw. Here we have another legendary item as we look at the Grisius Core. This item changes Giratina's form between Altered Form and Origin Form. As a Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it is required to be held by Giratina to change its forms and boosts the power of Dragon and Ghost type moves from the user by 20%. It is first seen in Pokemon Legends Arceus, and when used on Giratina, this large glowing gem wells with power and allows the Pokemon to change form. Just like with the respective items for Dialga, and we'll later talk with Palkia, this is the full form of the Grisius Orb. It can be found in the Distortion World, being Giratina's domain. In interviews with Junichi Masuda, Giratina and the Distortion World were to be personifications of antimatter. And honestly, like I said earlier, the whole dynamic between Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, and Arceus could get its entire own video on its own due to all the different potential theories in the relation and what they could be based on. Heartstone. When this item is held, any rock-type move used by the holder has its power increased by 20%. And it does state it's a durable stone that boosts the power of the holder's rock-type moves. It is first seen in Gold and Silver, naturally held by Corsola, Aeron line, Rock'n'Roller line, Dwebble line, Graveler, Golem, Onyx, and the Nosepass line. And some school kids Apom holds one, apparently. So I just imagine, like, it's not even the kid's actual Pokemon, even though it's in its Pokeball. It's just, like, a random Apom that likes to throw rocks at this kid, which is sad. I shouldn't joke about that. But, like, you know, dark comedy has to come out somewhere every once in a while. Nevertheless, hardness is the measure of, well, a rock's hardness. So it actually translates to the idea of what can it be scratched by, what can it scratch, as a more basic example of it. So like marble has a hardness of like 3 to 5, depending on the type of marble it is, and granite has a hardness between 6 and 8. So marble can't scratch granite, but granite absolutely will scratch marble, and a high quality like knife might be sitting at about, steel knife by the way, might be sitting at about 7 as far as hardness goes, and it might scratch the granite depending on the composition of the granite. Now, like, I actually had to use that example in real life recently when talking about having like a marble or granite countertop, and no, that's not something I'm getting. I do not have money like that, not in the slightest. But it was a conversation like, oh, like, blah, 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 what kind of countertop would be best? And that was really fun to be able to talk about that. I love my geology. Back to Pokemon, though. Now, it would make sense that Geodude, the Alolan line for Geodude as a whole, and Steelix don't have it because of their overall composition. Some of them might be too soft, meanwhile, Steelix might be too hard. Oh, God. Knowing that it can scratch Diamond, which Diamond sits at a 10 on the hardness scale. Now you've got your heavy-duty boots. This item, when held, prevents the Pokemon from receiving any damage from spikes, toxic spikes, or stealth rocks. The heavy-duty boots prevent the effect of traps on the battlefield, and it's first seen in Pokemon Sword and Shield, found in the Galar Mines. It directly translates from Japanese into thick-soled shoes. They're not combat boots, they are literally just iron-toed shoes for the most part, but thick-soled shoes, whatever. Stuff that you'd actually just typically wear in construction or walking in a dangerous area or whatever. They're going through the mines. I'm like 70% sure that the individuals who work in those mines, I feel like the seagulls from Finding Nemo, wear these boots. With the Iron Ball, this item is to be held by a Pokemon and the holder's speed is reduced by 50%. If the holder is of the flying type or has the ability to levitate, it becomes susceptible to ground type moves. It's first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, and its name directly translates to Black Steel Orb. Now, it is naturally found on Mawile, which kind of just does eat whatever it can. It eats what it likes to with its actual mouth, and then with its big chompers on its head, it eats whatever it doesn't think tastes good, but then can still like eat and absorb, so on and so forth, just so that way it can keep surviving. And it is a steel type, now a steel fairy type Pokemon. Now, Diamond and Pearl in the manga found an Iron Ball amongst the metal items drawn out of the ground in Celestic Town by the magnetic field from Cyrus's Magnezone. It later appeared as an item that was used in conjunction with Lax's Fling in Platinum's gym battle against Fantina and Mirages of Miss Magus 2. I only laugh because you have the move Fling, right? And we know that Fling does different damage based on what item you're using is. And I very much think of the spell Catapult in D&D, where you're just like random BS go, throwing whatever you can at the enemy and just going for it. And I imagine just, oh, here's like light clay, almost no damage. What do you think that was gonna do? Next turn, oh hey, here's an Iron Ball, boonk, even though you can only hold one item, but whatever. Either way, it's very straightforward. It's literally just an Iron Ball, which would be incredibly dense and incredibly heavy, depending on the size, of course. We come back with a classic from the King's Rock. When this item is held by a Pokemon, the likelihood of the opponent flinching from a damaging attack by this Pokemon is increased by 10%. It evolves Poliwhirl into Politoed and Slowpoke into Slowking. Naturally found on Poliwhirl, Poliwrath, Slowbro, Slowking, Politoed, Hawlucha, and Hariyama. So it makes sense why the two lines of Pokemon that evolve would have it, but why do Hawlucha and Hariyama have it? Because there could only be one King of the Ring, baby! Literally, Hawlucha being a luchador, King of the Ring, and then Hariyama being another martial artist of sorts, King of the Ring. There could only be one champion. Boom. Also in the anime, we do see a number of instances of it where it first appeared in Ringmasters. Ash receives it as a prize, and then Misty's Poliwhirl uses it to evolve into Politoed, as it's held while being transferred between Pokemon centers, which is really interesting because if you can evolve your Pokemon just by transferring it between Pokemon centers instead of trading with an actual person, that makes a lot of other trade evolutions really, really freaking sad in the show or the games, for me at least. Now, another King's Rock appeared in Crowning Achievement, and the Slowpoke from Alice uses it to evolve into a Slowking, as a Shelter bit onto it while that crown was on Slowpoke's head, which honestly really interesting. I never thought about that. Like I typed that, I found that, pasted it into my notes because I look at Bulbapedia, Cerebi, and the Pokemon database for a lot of my information and then deep dive further, but I didn't process what that really meant until just now. Because you don't see that in the games. You see, oh, it's a Slowpoke, slap the thing on its head, and boom, there you go. So, the fact that both happen at the same time, unless I'm getting my brain all confused right now, and it's funnier if I don't double check. Now, in Showdown at Lanoon, a King's Rock was one of the items Token had picked up, and in Pokemon Adventures, we see it again as it's given to a Poliwag named Polibo to hold, and evolves into Poliwhirl, where it then uses the King's Rock to evolve into Politoed when he was temporarily traded to Silver. Don't get stuck behind, as we now have the Lagging Rock! Yay! Anywho, when this item is held by a Pokemon, the holder will always move last in its speed priority group in turn. Trick Room does not affect this item. So, it is a tremendously heavy item, and it's first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, found naturally on Slowpoke, the Lickitung line, and the Cufant line. Well, okay, Slowpoke is slow, that's the joke. It's the Internet Explorer of
everything. Honestly, I don't even know if that's even a relevant joke anymore. Do people... I'm 25. Like, do you guys even know the Internet Explorer joke anymore? Because Microsoft Edge exists, and so you're gonna make Edge jokes? I don't know. Like, huh? So we know Slowpoke is slow. Qfant is an elephant, and its evolution is also still an elephant, and they're both slow-moving, large creatures. But why the Lickitung line? The only thing I could figure out regarding the Lickitung line is because it has that very large tail, which we might assume contains its tongue in it to some capacity. And that tail being so large, I'd be amazed if it didn't just, because you see it with like the tail up, I wouldn't be amazed if it just lets the tail drop and it drags the tail most of the time. We see that with animals such as like raccoons that will just drag their tail along, or because they're really fat, you can tell if like it's a raccoon track, not just from the little pawsies, but also because you can see where their fat bellies are dragging across the ground. So that's where my brain goes when I think of lagging rock, lagging tails, and so on and so forth. The leak is actually more interesting than I thought it would have ever been. Now, when this item is held by Farfetch'd, the holder's critical hit ratio is raised by 2 stages. In Pokemon Sword and Shield, this item's name was changed from Stick to Leak. First seen in Gold and Silver, though. It is naturally held by Farfetch'd and Surfetch'd. Now, it all derived likely from the saying of a duck comes bearing bunching onions. As a saying, it means, it can't be directly translated, but it means something surprising but convenient. Even its Japanese name, Farfetch'd, can be roughly translated to duck holding a green onion. Also, apparently ducks, when served with green onion or lynx, they do that often because those two food items genuinely go really well together. I mean, I've had duck before, not professionally done. I just got it on sale from the store one day. I was like, oh, hey, that's a super nice thing. Ate that, did not do a great job making it, and I definitely did not eat it with any green onion. So, I don't know, somebody out there who's done it, please tell me from personal experience how that like flavor mixes together, because I'm very curious. And honestly, ironically, despite the fact that they go really good together in a meal, ducks themselves get digestive issues from anything in the allium family, which would be onion, shallot, garlic, leek, chives, and then also separate from that family would be citrus fruits and spinach. Continuing down our alphabetical L's, we have leftovers. When this item is held at the end of every turn, the holder regains 1/16 of their maximum HP. First seen in Pokemon Gold and Silver. Naturally found on Munchlax and Snorlax, and it used to be found on Clefable for some reason. This item is closely tied to Snorlax in the sheer amount of food it constantly eats. I mean, there's many different like images where you've at least seen one where a Snorlax is eating like the apple core itself, which is the image for leftovers. While it may technically never have its fill, Snorlax constantly eating and Munchlax constantly doing the same thing, it does still sleep very often, so it probably is like mid-eating and just drops it off to the side, allowing it to have leftovers. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm, again, always open to corrections, or you guys telling me additional information in the comments, because I love to learn, but leftovers are traditionally not a thing in Japan when we compare it to Western countries, and it's something that apparently, like, I hate the road I live on. And it's something that if you ask for like a take-home box, you're not really gonna get one for one reason or another. So I don't know if that's the same in any other countries outside of Japan. I know like leftovers are very much a thing in the United States, because I live in the United States. Haha. The Life Orb. When this item is held by a Pokemon, the damage from the moves used by the holder is increased by 30%. The holder loses 10% of their maximum HP each turn. It is first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. Now, it doesn't show up in the anime or manga, oddly enough, which I really expected to see, but it is naturally found on Absol. Absol being the Omen Pokemon. I couldn't quite find any, like, more in-depth ties to it all, but if we look at everything else, such as every location you find it, Stark Mountain, Ruins of Alph, Resolution Cave, Mount Lanakila, Slumbering Well, Giant's Bed, and Castle Royale Lake,
all of them have an incredible level of importance. Maybe it's religious through Lanakila, maybe it's just ancient or ruins of a lost city or a past we don't know of yet, or even just a mysterious and powerful land if we look at things like Cassiopeia Lake, which is home to dragons as a whole, attracting them all to this area. Where it specifically may derive from could simply be from legendaries, pseudo-legendaries, or even dragons themselves. I don't believe there's any one singular source, even if we ignore being able to buy multiple from the shops. And especially if we just look at it as a whole, it seems as though it is like the coalescence of energy in physical form, just from, I'm gonna say, like, I don't know how to describe it otherwise. Like, I was gonna say spiritual pressure, and that's just getting too weeby for me. That's getting too weeby for me. Light Ball. It is a mysterious orb that, when held by Pikachu, the attack and special attack of that Pikachu is doubled. It is first seen in Pokemon Gold and Silver, and if held by either parent of a Pichu when the egg is produced, the Pichu that hatches will know the move Volt Tackle. From Generation 6 onward, if it knows Volt Tackle in this way, it could be taught Volt Tackle again at the reminder if it forgets the move. Now, it could be a reference to Ball Lightning. Ball lightning is a rare and unexplained phenomenon described as luminescent spherical objects that vary from pea-sized to several meters in diameter. This is not a meter. I don't know why I made my hand so small. I mean, I should have gone like this. Anywho, ball lightning has simultaneously captured people's imagination and circumvented a clear scientific explanation for centuries. Although we don't understand it, it's not actually uncommon to see ball lightning. Some statistics state that its occurrence rate is the same as regular lightning strikes. Considering that this item is only naturally held by Pikachu, and when many Pikachu gather, lightning tends to strike more often, and the idea that ball lightning was rare, this could all coalesce to why only Pikachu does have it as an item. So essentially, it's just one big reference to multiple lightning strikes, meaning it brings up the chance of seeing ball lightning, and for some reason we now have it as an item. The only alternative I can think of this is, like, you know those, and I just thought of it, so, you know, bear with me, but the orb that has, like, that it kind of represents static electricity or something like that, plasma orbs, is that what they're called? Where it's the orb, you touch it, and then the electricity moving around inside, all, like, tentacle-like, is like, zoop, right to your finger. So maybe it's related to that, but I'm gonna say it's related to ball lightning. Like Clay, when this item is held by a Pokemon, if the holder uses the attack's Reflect or Light Screen, the effect of those attacks lasts 8 turns as opposed to 5. It is first seen in Diamond and Pearl, naturally found with the Baltoy, Golett, and Mudbraid lines. Now, Clay is one of the 3 makeups of soil, the other 2 being sand and silt. It's always a composition of the 3, and there is like a diagram triangle that helps you figure out what that could be depending on percentage. I had to study that a bunch. Now, Baltoy and Golett are made from clay. Meanwhile, Mudbraid can make high quality mud, which I loved this. This made me really happy because it can only be produced by digging deeper into lowland soils, as depending on the area, clay is not immediately available on the surface, and similar to Hawaii, is restricted to pockets in any relatively swampy regions. This would make sense why Mudbraid Mudsdale are needed. They like bite into the soil and are able to mix it with their saliva to create something a little bit more useful. Because of all this, related back to real life, not Pokemon, Hawaii in the past never really had native pottery due to the lack of clay, which once again just shows how important Mudbraid Mudsdale is in the creation of societies throughout Alolan history. So it'd be really cool if we get like a Legends, I don't know, Tapu, whatever the heck that they would do, which, oh my gosh, actually that would be really cool, because then we could see when the Ultra Beasts first started coming through the portals in older settlements in Alola, and get to see the building of settlements through the mass cooperation with Mudbraid Mudsdale. Oh, mark my words. If that ever happens, I'm just gonna turn this exact part into a short and be like, I guessed this 5 years ago. Loaded dice. This hold item will make it so your multi-hit moves will hit. Okay, hold on.
Loaded dice. This hold item will make it so your multi-hit moves will hit the highest amount of times. It would roll a lower amount if it rolls again for the higher amount.
It's first seen in Scarlet and Violet. Now, there's not really any lore here. They're literally loaded dice, and I'm amazed they didn't show up late or earlier in this series, because loaded dice are literally just cheat dice that are meant to give you the result that you want, and even the direct translation of the name from Japanese gives it the name cheating dice. Now, again, I say the result that you want because depending on the dice game that you're playing, you don't necessarily want to just hit nothing but sixes all the time. You don't want the highest number. Because if you didn't know, the dice should be, if I remember correctly, on opposite. I literally have a die. Hold on. So if you didn't know, if you look at dice, you're gonna have, even though you can't see this because it's so tiny, it has a little duck or chicken in it. I play D&D. Who would have guessed? But 1 and 6 make 7. 2 and 5, opposite sides make 7. 4 and 3 make 7. So you weigh it on the 4 sides. That way, when you roll it, its weight pulls it down onto the 4, and then you get a result of 3 on top for your desired number. So, loaded dice, there's your story. Don't cheat. With the Lucky Egg, any Pokemon holding this item has its XP gain increased by 50%, first seen in Pokemon Gold and Silver. Naturally, it is found with the Happiny line and the Pelipper line. We know that Happiny itself does not have an egg yet, so it carries a small rock in its place until it can. Meanwhile, Pelipper, based on a pelican, but despite that, it shares the connection to the baby-carrying stork, as it transports eggs and small Pokemon. Now, you can call it an egg all you want, but in reality, this is just a lucky stone. Along the lines of being lucky, we have Lucky Punch. When this item is held by Chansey, its critical hit ratio is raised by 2 stages. First seen in Pokemon Gold and Silver, naturally found on Happiny and Chansey. This is likely because it has such short arms that this item is specifically for them. So I imagine them like whipping this thing out and going boom, you know what I mean? So that's the whole point of it. Now, I could have sworn I've seen a Chansey use this in the anime, but I cannot find any confirmation in GIFs, images, Bulbapedia, any other database that I have stated before. I just cannot find it. So if somebody could at least confirm for me somehow, somewhere, that they have also seen a Chansey use this item in the anime, mwah, you're a beautiful human being. Luminous Moss is an item where if the holder is hit by a water type attack, the holder's special defense stat is increased by 1 stage. The item is then consumed. This item is first seen in Pokemon X and Y and is naturally found on the Pokemon Corsola. This is likely a reference to Riccardia chemdrifolia, otherwise known as coral moss. As quoting, they are a delicate dark to medium green liverwort clinging to wood or rock with their rhizoids, where they form compact cushions or lawn-like populations. They are called coral moss or mini pelia in the aquarium hobby due to their dense ramification. So in reality, to my knowledge, they don't actually grow on coral and instead is just another joke or pun. Closing out our L's, we finish off with the Lustrous Globe. The item changes Palkia's form between its standard and origin form. As of Scarlet and Violet, it has to hold the item in order to change forms. It increases the power of dragon and water type moves from the user by 20%, and is first seen in Diamond and Pearl in regards to the Lustrous Orb. Now, just as previously stated, it's basically just its form of the globes or anything else that Giratina and Dialga had, and is the full original form of the gem. Now, I feel bad for keeping it short, but outside of the basic lore that everybody knows, and I've kind of already stated regarding these items, and the summoning/changing of Palkia as it did with the other two, there is nothing else of incredible note to state here. Going from L's to M's, we have the Macho Brace. An item when held doubles the effort values the Pokemon earns from each battle, however, it lowers the Pokemon's speed. An item to be held by a Pokemon is Stiff and Heavy Brace that promotes strong growth but lower speed, as for its flavor text, and first seen in Ruby Sapphire. They're shown a little bit in the show, but what's really weird is they look really, incredibly different. Ultimately, a brace is just, a brace. It goes on you, it holds tight, it helps with a number of different things, medically or otherwise, and it wraps around the intended body part. As for it being stiff, again, that makes sense. It is a brace.
and then you add on the fact that it is heavy. I mean, you could look at weighted gear that does exist in real life. Honestly, I'll be real, I do wear like a weighted vest when I exercise sometimes, but you're not going to wear something that's like 300 pounds. No, I have like a 20-pound vest, and then I have 10-pound leg weights. Depending on the exercise that you're doing, you could use these as long as you are being careful for your regular exercises that would otherwise be too difficult to carry an actual weight with. So it makes sense that you would put on a weight, and those things do have to stay kind of close to your body. Otherwise, if you're moving too fast, you can injure yourself, and you just kind of do your exercise, and it's a stiff weighted gear. Onto Magmarizer. It is a box packed with a tremendous amount of magma energy, and it is loved by a certain Pokemon. That certain Pokemon is Magmar, which uses it to evolve into Magmortar when traded while holding the item, and it's first seen in Diamond and Pearl, being the parallel to Electabuzz. Now, it is also consumed when it evolves into Magmortar, and honestly, considering the shape of the item and looking at Magmortar, it could literally just be the mortar that's on its arm, just kind of broken open. Magnet. Wow, that's dramatic. When this item is held, an electric type move used by the holder has its power increased by 20%. First seen in Gold and Silver, this item is naturally found on the Nosepass line and on Magneton. This makes sense for Nosepass as it points towards north at all times. More than likely, it actually points towards magnetic north instead of true north. There is a difference. You're looking at magnetic fields of the Earth versus the actual directional north that may or may not exist, which with magnetic north, you have to adjust for your north because of it all and all of our compasses, which Nosepass is based off of. When we look at the Pokemon Adventures manga, in the last Battle 4, during the final battle against the Masked Man, Lieutenant Surge used a magnet to power up the moves of Raikou. Notably, the magnet that appeared was a lodestone rather than a horseshoe magnet that you would normally see in the games, and this is because the chapter was released before the magnets had been given a proper sprite. It is modeled after a traditional magnet, which we also see makes up Magnemite's arms, if you want to call them that. I mean, it kind of uses them as arms, and it's a magnet. What do you want from me? First of the herbs is the Mental Herb. In Generation 4, at the end of using a move, if the holder of this item is infatuated, the Pokemon recovers. This item disappears after use. It is first seen in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, found on the Lotad line, so Water line, and the Pancham line. I assume it's because the leaves that they have as a part of their body, because at least Levany is a nanny, and the line in general kind of coats itself in leaves that it fashions for itself, so it could potentially cover itself in this leaf or as a part of it. And then Pancham, Pangoro kind of literally have a leaf in their mouth, so again, possibly that they accidentally have one, found one, and just keep it in their mouth. Now, Lotad is a little bit of an outlier, and the only thing I can think of outside of like, because Lotads are large, they're big, they're like this big, you know, and they have the big leaf on their head, but Mental Herbs aren't that large, assumedly, unless it grows it as their, you know, rain dish. Alternatively, it's really loose comparison. Their shiny does have a blue for the leaf instead, but it's not the same shade of lightness that the Mental Herb has, so a bit of a stretch. So Metal Coat is actually a fun one that I didn't think would be interesting until recently. When this item is held, any Steel-type move used by the holder has its power increased by 20%. In addition, it evolves Onix into Steelix and Scyther into Pinsir when traded with it, and it is then consumed. It first appeared in Pokemon Gold and Silver, and it's found naturally on the Magnemite line, Steelix, Skarmory, Beldum line, and Bronzor line, all of them being Steel types. And so, while we know Onix can evolve into Steelix naturally just by continually hardening itself through all the tunneling that it does, I couldn't find anything to figure out why Scyther is able to evolve into Caesar in this way. Again, I know that you put the metal coating on it, but this Pokemon is apparently also found in the wild, so how does it do that? Because you have a lot of other Pokemon, like the old Gudra, who drank a lot of water or was around a lot of iron-rich areas, in which case it had its shell in the Hisuian era, or you get a lot of these other steel types that exist because they hardened their body, or they ate something that had a lot of iron in it, or drank something with a lot of iron in it. So what's the case for Scyther? I don't quite understand. Either way, though, ultimately it is a metal coat, and it turns the coat on their outsides or their exoskeleton or whatever into steel. From metal coat to metal powder. When this item is held by Ditto, the holder's initial defense and special defense stats are increased by 50%. It is first seen in gold and silver, and quick powder, which doubles the speed of Ditto, is another thing specifically for Ditto, first seen in diamond and pearl. Both can only be found on Ditto naturally. And honestly, this very well could be a reference, specifically the metal powder, to when Ditto was supposed to have an evolution named Atamon, which would have been done through the use of trading, possibly with metal coat. So maybe the metal coat meant for Ditto got crushed or otherwise, and again, this is just a reference to Atamon. Metronome. When this item is held by a Pokemon, if the holder uses a move multiple times consecutively, its power is boosted by 10% of its original power-up to Black and White, and 20% of its original power-up from Black and White onward. The effect stops increasing once it hits 100% and resets if another move is used. It is originally seen, or first seen, in Diamond and Pearl, and it's naturally found on Kricketot, Kricketune, and Chatot. Sorry, let me correct myself here. Kricketot and Chatot. And honestly, very simple. Metronomes are meant to keep beats with music, and those three Pokemon are very directly related to music, not just noise or sound. And event Pokemon that have it include Meloetta and the Piplup from Meloetta's Sparkling Recital Wi-Fi giveaway in Japan of 2012, which is adorable, and I had to keep it comedically or overly specific. Miracle Seed. When this item is held, any grass-type move used by the holder has its power increased by 20%, and it is said to be a seed imbued with life force. Now, it is first seen in gold and silver and found naturally on the Cherubi line, Maractus line, Fomantis line, Carnivine, and Pumpkaboo. All Pokemon with many seeds, with exception to Carnivine. That one's a weird one. And that explains why it used to be, potentially. But you might be thinking, wait, Fomantis has a lot of seeds? And yes, actually, being based on the Orchid Flower and Orchid Mantis, a single capsule of the tropical American orchid, Cycnocchies Calorkilon, I'm not redoing that, produces almost 4 million seeds. Also, there is a miracle seed fruit in real life, and the National Institute of Health actually was studying it in the past years to see if it has a link to fixing any diseases related to mental memory, focus, or even Alzheimer's. We have the Muscle Band, another easy one. When this item is held, the holder's physical attacks are increased in power by 10%, and it exudes strength. First seen in Diamond and Pearl, and I would like to just chalk this up as a similar item in lore, quote-unquote, to the Focus Sash. Mirror Herb is an item that will make the holder's stats raise the same as the opponent's one time, and then it is consumed. Now, if you use something like Dragon Dance and it raises 2 stats, then the Mirror Herb is consumed and you get both stats raised. In Picnics, though, if a Pokemon is holding this item and has a spare move slot and is in the picnic with a Pokemon that knows one of the Pokemon's egg moves, it will learn that egg move even if the other Pokemon is not part of its egg group. Ridiculous thing that I would not have been able to find out without doing research. Now, it is first seen in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and is specifically found in Cascarafa, and is directly translated to Imitation Herb. Mirror plants do exist in real life, but they exist in Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, and Pacific Islands, so since it's not really native, I doubt that it's not exactly related to the Mirror Herb itself, but it could be. We bring the N to the M's with Mystic Water. When this item is held, any water-type move used by the holder has its power increased by 20%, first seen in Gold and Silver, and is naturally found on the Goldeen line, Lapras, Castform, Dewpider line, and in event, Palafin. All water Pokemon or relation to water or water droplets with Castform still being that by all means, considering it's a weather Pokemon. It does appear in the Perfect Match, where a Mystic Water was the prize given to the winner of the World Cup. There's another section where it's a treasure hunt and they find it, where it gets turned into a necklace. The Masked Man is defeated via the use of Misty and the Mystic Water to power up the moves of Suicune. And water is seen as very sacred in a lot of cultures, whether that be through general life, religion. Examples that we can look at would be through Japan's eyes, of course, which we would find to be similar in many other regions of the world in some capacity. Through some research, I was able to find that Suijin means water god and is the general term for spirits found in or around water. Rain and access to water were even more important to people in ancient times, as they lacked any of the conveniences of our modern lives. It was natural for farmers and fishermen to have a being that could help them daily. You see it in so many forms of media, shows, tabletop games such as D&D and so on and so forth, where you have like gods of the harvest, which, I mean, we have like the Tortoise Thunderous, Landorus even. You have water gods in general, gods of the sea, rain, weather, agriculture, so on and so forth. So water is super sacred, and it makes sense why mystic water exists in many cultures. The only item in N would be Never Melt Ice. When this item is held, any ice type move used by the holder has its power increased by 20%. An item to be held by a Pokemon that has heat repelling properties, and it's first seen in Gold and Silver. Now, it is naturally found in the Snover line, the Vanillite line, Cryogonal, and in the past it was found on Dugong, Piloswine, and Glalie. Funny enough, even Deoxys held it in the events in 2007, and all these Pokemon are ice types, or in the case of Deoxys, related to the cold, empty void of space. Now, Never Melt Ice is also a major part in the Pokemon Legends Arceus games, as it is a centerpiece of the Alabaster Icelands, but as the full, true Never Melt Ice that exists. And now we move on to another item that was lost to time and replaced, actually, as we have the Pink Bow. When this item is held, any normal type move used by the holder has its power increased by 10%. First and only seen in Gold and Silver and then in Pokemon Crystal, it was given away at Route 29 and at the Goldenrod Radio Tower. It was also known as the Polka Dot Bow at some point, and ultimately it was replaced by the Silk Scarf, which I'll mention later. Poison Barb. When this item is held, any poison type moves used by the holder has its power increased by 20%. First seen in Gold and Silver, and is naturally found on Beedrill, Tentacle line, Quillfish, Budew line, Vespiquen, Scorpio line, Venipede line, Mareanie line, Cacnea line, and Arbok in the past. Now, each of these Pokemon has some sort of spike or barb on their body that distributes poison, except for Arbok, which distributes poison through its teeth, which is probably why it doesn't have it anymore. And maybe it'll come back and it'll have it in the future, but it's very cut and dry as to where its origins derive from. Getting a lot of short ones right now, as we also have Power Inklet, Power Band, Power Belt, Bracer, Lens, and Weight. They are items to be held by a Pokemon that reduce the Pokemon's specific stat in battle, but also allows that stat to grow more quickly. It would be in respective order to how I stated them: speed, special defense, defense, attack, special attack, and HP. They are all found originally in Diamond and Pearl, and again, we can relate this back to weighted gear. By putting a drawback on a specific trait of yours, but still trying to make that trait grow, you then allow it to grow faster. Bringing back the herbs, as we have Power Herb. When this item is held by a Pokemon, if the user uses Bounce, Dig, Dive, Fly, Razor Wind, Skull Bat, Sky Attack, or Solar Beam, the turn where the Pokemon charges is skipped, and the Pokemon instead immediately attacks, and the herb is then used and disappears as it is consumed. It is first seen in Diamond and Pearl, and naturally found on the C-Dot line, which is very interesting considering Shiftry is known for its big, large, powerful leaves that are resembling of fans, and we also know that Shiftry is also based on the Great Tengu of Japanese lore, who wielded large fans. We can support this because there are rumors that Shiftry was, or used to be, a very large, powerful bird that would summon great whirlwinds, which is why Shiftry can learn that move, and Ultimately, due to its crimes or whatever it did, the gods punished it and turned it into what it is now. Protective pads, very cut and dry. The hold item will prevent the Pokemon from any damage or effects that they would receive from making physical contact from their opponent, like rough skin on a Carvana. It's first seen in Pokemon Sun and Moon, and a very straightforward example as in boxing, you would wear the protective pads and, person punches, so on and so forth, so that way the person doesn't get hurt. A protector is an item that, when attached to a Pokemon and traded, evolves the Pokemon. Specifically looking at Rhydon into Rhyperior. It is an extremely stiff and heavy item that is loved by this Pokemon and is quote-unquote consumed by it, when in reality it's kind of fused into and worn by the Pokemon as it evolves. In the Pokemon manga, Pokemon Adventures, Diamond and Pearl arc, in Yikes Yanmega, Diamond's Licky Licky, named Kit, used a protector to protect itself from Mars's Yanmega Swarms' sound waves. That took me 3 times to try and say out loud. I just need to say that for, just to vent that. Now, Roseanne later revealed that the protector was one of the items she used in her research of Pokemon evolution. It's also used in the Heart Gold and Soul Silver arc. A Rhydon was traded with it, and it evolved as it was a temporary replacement for the Lost Ursa Ring that Silver had. Now, ultimately, the item itself is literally a good protector that helps people, and Rhydon just so happens to really like it, having the claws and the head to attack, but probably just wants a little bit more armor to itself. Also, thanks to Korn, who is a friend of mine in real life, he has, since seeing Rhyperior in its big old fat body, has called it gordito, which is just calling something fat or big in in Spanish. So I can't see it anywhere else. I can't name it anything else. Punching gloves. This item will boost the power of punching based moves by 10% for the holder. I am not naming all the moves. This move also prevents any effects from physical contact from affecting the holder if they are using a punching based move. This stacks with the ability Iron Fist and is first seen in Scarlet and Violet. It's literally just a punching glove with a simplified image of an impact like the POW that you'd see in old cartoons or shows or anything like that on the back of the glove itself. Okay, so we have a big one here. This is probably one of the bigger ones, as we have incense, finally. Incense are a group of held items that were introduced in Generation 3. They allow bred Pokemon to produce baby Pokemon they otherwise would not be able to, and they have unrelated in-battle effects, depending on which one you're actually looking at. So, despite that, direct text, a good chunk of them were introduced in Generation 4, and meanwhile, a couple of other ones were shown in Generation 3. Each one is representative of what the Pokemon essentially is, turns into, lives inside of, or has traits of. So, let's go through them. We have Full Incense. When this item is held by a Pokemon, the holder will always move last in speed priority group in the turn. Trick Room does not affect this item. When attached to a female Snorlax and put in the breeding center with a compatible father, the baby will hatch into a Munchlax. Lax Incense raises the holder's evasion by 5%. If attached to a female Wobbuffet, you get a Wynot. Luck increases the money earned from the battle, doubling it, and if given to a Chansey or Blissey, you get a Happening. Odd Incense, held by a Psychic type, increases the power by 20%, and when given to a female Mr. Mime, weird, you will get a Mime Jr. Pure Incense. If this item is held by the first Pokemon in your party, random wild Pokemon of a level lower than the holder will appear 2/3 of the time from Diamond and Pearl through Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, or 12.5% of the time in Sword and Shield. When attached to Chimecho, you get a Chingling. Rock Incense. Rock power moves increase by 20%. Sudowoodo, you get a Bonsly. Rose Incense. Grass type moves increase by 20%, and you give it to Roselia Roserade, you get a Badoo. Then with our last two, you have Sea Incense. Water type moves increased by 20% in terms of damage, and when given to Moril or Azumarill, you get an Azurill when breeding. And Wave Incense, another one where water type moves are increased by 20%. When given to a Mantine, you get a Mantike. We get the only one in the Q section with Quick Claw. When this item is held, the user has an 18.75% chance in Generation 3 or 4, or a 20% chance in Generation 5 of attacking first if the moves all Pokemon use are within the same speed priority level. So as long as the opponent doesn't use Quick Attack and you're using a normal move, you have those percent chances, depending on the game, to move before them. So as long as, again, priorities are on the same level. Now, it is a light, sharp claw, as it's described, and it's naturally found in Meowth, and it's a Alolan line, Zangoose, Sneasel line, and the Sandshrew line. All of them do have sharp claws as their primary line of offense. And it's clearly a reference to speed, quick, claw, and its consonants, but it might also be a relatable pun to the quick of a dog's paw, even though no dog Pokemon naturally have it. Razor Claw, when this item is held by a Pokemon, the holder's critical hit ratio is raised by 1 stage. It evolves Sneasel or Hisuian Sneasel when they hold it and level up during night or day in that respective order, and is first seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, naturally found on the Jangmo-o line, which I could not find the actual reason why they would hold it. Like, their whole thing is clanging scales, making noise, doing all these different things. And I know they have sharp claws and all that, and we could look at the potential that they're based on the Mo-o, or even more based on Komodo dragons as well, which do have sharp claws, but that's such a stretch in my mind, so it might just be coincidence. We get Razor Fang. When this item is held by a Pokemon, if the holder uses a move that damages the opponent, the chance of the opponent flinching is increased by 10%. It evolves Gligar into Gliscor when held and leveled up at night, first seen in Diamond and Pearl, and naturally found on Bruxis, which is known for having the very sharp chompers that it has, but we can assume many other incredibly sharp fangs can be used, as we don't see Bruxis in many other games or regions in general. Another one of my favorites here is the Reaper Cloth in terms of its lore, as it is a cloth imbued with horrifyingly strong spiritual energy and is loved by a certain Pokemon. That certain Pokemon is Dusclops, as if it holds it and is traded while holding the Reaper Cloth, it evolves into Dusk Noir, first seen in Diamond and Pearl. When we look at the Pokemon Adventures manga, the Diamond and Pearl arc, there is a Duskull that uses the Reaper Cloth to save Diamond and Pearl from a fall, and it is later on used to actually be seen as something that does cause evolution, thanks to Roseanne doing the studying and research that she does. Honestly, though, if I have to be full-on true, Duskull is one of my favorite lines in terms of, like, their lore every single time I learn about them, because they're just so cool. I mean, if we look at, you know, what it eats, how it behaves, and so on and so forth, this Pokemon goes from just a quote-unquote dead ghost Pokemon, or whatever it really is, to eventually just becoming the Grim Reaper itself and being relatively, I don't want to say benevolent, because the idea of the Grim Reaper is one of the few, like, deities or even harvestmen, because it's technically not a deity in some cultures, that even the gods are sitting here going, no, we don't mess with that. We do not mess with the boatman of the river Styx. Do not. It is a bad idea. You let him do his thing, and that is that. Red Card is an item that if the holder is damaged by an attack, the mysterious power of this card can remove the attacker from battle, first seen in Black and White, and it's known for, in real life, being a penalty card in sports. And to directly quote, a red card prevents a player from playing for the remainder of the match, and as a result reduces the number of players that are available to the team, and carries a 2-minute suspension for the team, meaning that a team cannot replace the disqualified player until the 2-minute team suspension has expired. While the item doesn't do that in the game, that's just its real life connection. We get the Red Orb, which depending on the game that you're playing, gives different effects. In Ruby, it awakens Groudon in the Cave of Origin. In Soul Silver, it appears in the Embedded Tower, or Groudon does. Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, it causes Primal Groudon to actually become a thing when it's sent into battle. And ultimately, very much the same as the Blue Orb, no additional lore, as when it comes to the lore, the two items are very closely kept together and tied. Now, we get the ring targeting here. Direct translation of that would be Bullseye, and when attached to a Pokemon, allows the Pokemon to receive damage from the opponent regardless of any type immunities, and is first seen in Pokemon Black and White. Now, another straightforward one in terms of lore, Archery Bullseye, and could be fun to use Trick. Give this item to an opponent and unleash whatever move you think would be nice on the choice item to Pokemon. Now, I'm not a Pokemon professional competitive player. Do not take my strategies as gospel, please, because while I might be good at strategy, I will throw the entire book out the window. You know, get your Rocky helmet, and when it's attached to a Pokemon, it causes the attacker to receive recoil damage should they make a physical type attack and hit. It is first seen in black and white, and funny enough, the helmet itself is very much depicted to be the classically depicted miner's helmet that you would see in Japanese media. And I love the idea that some rocks fell on some dude's head. They got embedded into the helmet, and he didn't get hurt or anything. He's like, oh, and he takes it off, and he looks at this helmet and goes, I'm alive, but it's not going through. And just decides that going completely against OSHA is a great idea, leaves it on or gives it to a Pokemon so that any time someone hits him, they get hurt in return because of the rocks on his head. Really stupid. Please replace your helmet before you die, you idiot. Room service is a short one. This item, when held, lowers the user's speed by 1 stage when a trick room is set up. First seen in Sword and Shield. Now, it's a good joke because trick room followed up by room service, good in doubles, I assume, as the slow Pokemon makes the room, and the one that would typically be faster has this item and gets its speed lowered. We now get the Rusted Shield and the Rusted Sword from Pokemon Sword and Shield, haha, who would have guessed, and it is said that a hero used this shield to halt a terrible disaster in ancient times, but it's grown rusty and worn. Zamazenta can hold it and change its form via it and become its crown shield form, whereas the Rusted Sword states that a hero used this sword to halt a terrible disaster in ancient times, and it's grown rusty and worn, and allows Zacian to actually change into its crowned sword form. Now, these are Pokemon that existed in ancient times with these ancient items that allow them to transform into the crowned forms, as I stated, and the 2 artifacts are kept in the Slumbering Weld and protected by these 2 legendary Pokemon's illusions. And in Pokemon Adventures, the shield was discovered by Galarian Moltres, and there were signs that the sword had been discovered through evidence in Spectrier's barn. These, as with many of the legendaries, can be given their own entire video due to their potential origins, their lore, how it ties into the region, and the world as a whole, so I'm not going to go super in-depth here, as that could take me 20-30 minutes minimum. Safety goggles will stop the Pokemon from receiving damage from weather effects and protects it from moves such as Sleep Powder. Now, it's first seen in X and Y, and event Pokemon Arcanine holds it, which I think is really cool considering Arcanine is known for going super fast when it's running, so it's nice to have something that protects your little puppo's eyes. Now, they are provided in the anime by Sophocles during the desert segment of the Charjabug race in order to avoid being blinded by the sandstorm present in that portion of the race. They have their colors, which are green on the outside and then red for the actual glass, designed after Flygon, which, for the love of everything, I think the best name for that line is calling the Trapinch line Goggles. But I digress, as, again, it's a clear-cut relation between the color and knowing that it was for the desert. I heard something above me and it scared me, and I'm going to keep that in the video because it was like above me and it scared the absolutely crap out of me. Scope Lens, directly translated to Focus Lens, raises the Pokemon's critical hit ratio by 1, and it is in flavor text stated to scope out or assist in scoping out a weak point in what you're looking at. It appears differently in the Rescue Team games, more as glasses, and is known as the magnifier in the trading card game series. But the game version is very reminiscent of like a field mini magnifier, similar to ones used in geology, just field magnifiers in general, instead of having like this big hunkin' like classic detective, you have something more wieldy. And the magnifying glasses just kind of slide out and boom, you can go ahead and see the smaller minerals throughout the item that you're actually looking at. Sharp Beak raises flying type moves used by the holder's damage by 20%. First seen in Gold and Silver, naturally held by the Spearoline and Doduoline, which makes sense because they have long, sharp beaks as described in the game's flavor text, which is very reminiscent of the design of the Sharp Beak itself. Now, beaks are bone, part of the skeleton, and will stay intact after death, so these are likely just their actual beaks that were left behind after they went permanently. We have the shed shell, which directly translates to beautiful skin, which I don't know how I feel about that, but if a trainer tries to switch the holder with another Pokemon, the switch is not affected by any moves or abilities which would prevent it from leaving, as assumedly you would try and grab them, prevent them from leaving, and they kind of shed it as they leave. It's first seen in Diamond and Pearl, and naturally found on Venomoth, Beautifly, Dustox, Viper, Scraggyline, Goomy, and Sliggoo. These are all Pokemon that do shed their skin, with the exception of Goomy Sliggoo, who could be said to have shed their shell from their Hisuian forms, as some slugs, / snails technically, are apt to do so as per evolution. To explain in a more scientific way at least, allow me to say this. Terrestrial slugs and sea slugs have convergently evolved a shellless existence. While sea slugs likely lost their shell to save energy, land slugs may have evolved due to lower amounts of calcium in the terrestrial environment. Shell bells help recover the holder's health by 1/8 of the damage inflicted on your opponent. The direct translation for this is a seashell bell, which is also first seen in Ruby and Sapphire. It's literally a seashell turned into a bell, but the hard part that racks my brain, and I could be wrong, is if you would put your typical ball bearing type item in there, maybe if it was glass, maybe not, but otherwise if you put something in there and you try to drill it in or attach it into the seashell, they're so fragile a lot of the time that one, you'd probably break the shell, and if you didn't and actually managed to get it to work, there's a pretty good chance that it wouldn't produce a very loud sound, and if shaken too much would just end up breaking it because they're more fragile. So it may instead be a reference to seashell wind chimes, which are the same hardness and won't break when making sounds because there are nothing but seashells on these wind chimes, and if you're clanging two things that have the same hardness against each other, there's a much lower chance of anything breaking, except through the weathering process. We finally get onto the Silk Scarf, as I mentioned that we would, and it raises normal type moves of the user / holder by 20%. And it is described as a sumptuous scarf. Now, it is found naturally on the Trubbish line, weirdly enough, and maybe because it might have been an old handkerchief that people used. The only notable event Pokemon with it is Lily's Vulpix in 2017, and it's a basic silk scarf. Now, if we look in the past, silk fabrics were very valuable and luxurious and used to make clothes or for imperial families. Now, they were also used as a symbol of luxury and prestige in ancient China, and became popular not only among aristocrats, but also among ordinary people in China and in various Asian countries. And if we look at even more modern, there's not really used as much. And even if they're not silk, if you look at white handkerchiefs and stuff like that, people used to use them for blowing your nose and stuff like that, so that you just continually use it and just collects disgust and filth and everything. And eventually, assumedly, you'd have to throw it out, and maybe that's why the Trubbish line has it. Otherwise, maybe old aristocrats threw them out. I don't know. That's a really weird tie-in. Silver Powder is first seen in Gold and Silver and increases Bug-type moves' power by 20%. Naturally found on Butterfree, Masquerain, Wormadam, Mothim, Volcarona, Venomoth, and Beautyfly. All of which do shed powder or scales in some capacity, except for Wormadam, which explicitly states that it doesn't shed its body at all, because it's like a skin now, which also doesn't make sense because we do shed our skin a little bit naturally. But whatever, it could just be a coincidence, and because it's part of the evolutionary line for Mothim, whatever. It's by bugs, for bugs, vote me for bug president. Don't, I like poison and ghost types the most. Smoke balls! If you try to run away and the Pokemon is holding it, you're guaranteed to be able to run away. First seen in Gold and Silver, naturally found in the Coughing line and Salandit line, both of which produce a lot of poison gas, but it's also held by Spiritomb in Pokemon Oris only, so that's interesting. Smoke balls are also seen in many forms of media as a form of escape. I mean, what do you want? That's a classic. Another cut and dry one is the Snowball. If the holder is hit by an ice type attack, the holder's attack stat is increased by 1 stage, and the item is then consumed. It is first seen in Pokemon X and Y, and is naturally found on Snorunt, Snom, and the Alolan Vulpix line, the former two being creatures that eat snow and ice, and Alolan Vulpix line creates blizzards. It's a freaking snowball. Not a lot of lore to be had there. Soft Sand allows any ground-type move used by the holder to have its power increased by 20%. And it's described as loose, silky sand, first seen in Gold and Silver. Now it is naturally found on the Diglett line and the Alolan Diglett line, Nincada, Trapinch, Stunfisk, and in the past, Sandslash. All of these Pokemon dig into the earth, likely breaking up the soil and causing it to degrade into sand, or at least soften. The reason for this is because when you have sand, it's typically like really rough particles, but if you keep grinding them against each other, you're going to round out those edges and make that coarse grain into softer, just softer grains. I was trying to find a different word for it, and you can't really do that, but either way, from coarse to soft through constant grinding or wearing down of those grains. And that's likely, again, because these Pokemon dig as much as they do. We have the Soothe Bell, which direct translation from Japanese is the Peace Bell, and when held by a Pokemon, the happiness earned by the Pokemon is doubled as it lets out a comforting chime that calms the holder. It is first seen in Ruby and Sapphire, and there are two notable event Pokemon that I think is really cute, such as with Victini for Happy Christmas in 2013 and the Chatot line for the 10th anniversary concert in 2006. Bells like this in their design are often associated with holiday celebrations or with reindeer, which makes it kind of odd that Stantler doesn't have it, but here we are. Soldew, when attached to Latios or Latias, raises their special attack and defense by 50%. As of Sun and Moon, it only increases the strength of Psychic and Dragon-type moves by 20%, and because of that, it is now allowed in Battle Tree and Battle Spot, because it is not absolutely broken, or because it's attached to Latios and Latias specifically. It first appeared in Pokemon Heroes Latios and Latias movie, and to abridge it for the most part, it's insinuated that the orb is made, or was, and contains the soul of a deceased Latios. This is because the orb itself is used in the movie that ends up reviving fossil Pokemon, Kabutops and Aerodactyl in the City Museum, amongst doing a lot of other things in the movie that are just insane in terms of power and ability. And during the climax of the movie, when that dew is destroyed, a new one is created as Latios sacrifices its life and saves Alto Mare, the city, from a massive tidal wave, using its own spirit to create a replacement for the destroyed gemstone. I saw that coming a mile away, and ooh, look at me. I'm an adult that saw what was gonna happen in a children's movie a mile away, but nevertheless, it made me mad. It made me so upset that had to happen. I genuinely hated the people in that movie that caused that. And I'm like, you know what? They're trapped in the metal ball. Leave them in there for like a week, please. Just let them stay in there. They did something horrible. You shouldn't do that, actually. Detain them. Blah, 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 blah. But, like, you know. They killed a legendary Pokemon. I'm gonna move on. The spell tag, directly translated to Cursed Ofuda, allows any ghost-type move used by the holder to have its power increased by 20%, and is described as a sinister, eerie tag. It is first seen in Gold and Silver, naturally found on the Shuppet line, Duskull line, Yamask line, Sandygast line, and in the past, Haunter, Gengar, and Mischievous. Just take what we talked about the Cleanse tag item previously, and now it's cursed. It bad now. It does opposite. It attract ghosts. It make curse on object or land or whatever it is. It's ruined. With Sticky Barb, when this item is held by a Pokemon, the holder will lose 1/8 of the maximum HP. If the opponent makes physical contact with the holder, then they will lose 1/8 of their maximum HP. If the opponent doesn't have a hold item, the item will transfer to them. Now, first seen in Diamond and Pearl, and is naturally found on the Cacnea line and the Ferroseed line. Similar to the Poison Barb item, this is just a directly related item to those Pokemon's spikes and them attaching to us on contact. Like, you can think of, outside of even just like cactus spikes, you can think of like burrs that you might get on you as a really good visual representation for this item. Trucking right along, we have the Terrain Extender, which directly translates, and I think is a better phrase or verbiage to use, ground coats. This hold item will extend grassy terrain, misty terrain, electric terrain, and psychic terrain by a further 3 turns when activated, either by the move or by the abilities that activate them. It is first seen in Sun and Moon, where these do appear for the first time, and, I mean, let's be real, epoxy does exist in real life alongside other items depending on the type of ground you're using it for, in order to protect the ground itself as a lacquer or spray or whatever else you so please. We now have the Thick Club, which is a classic item, as when it's held by Cubone or Marowak, the holder's attack stat is doubled. First seen in Gold and Silver, and is naturally carried by Cubone line and the Alolan Marowak itself. The Pokemon line is known to carry a bone in lore alongside the mask of their dead mother. And again, classic Pokemon lore, talking about dead Pokemon. Generation 1, baby. Another easy one, as we have Throat Spray. When held, causes a Pokemon special attack stat to be raised by 1 stage when it uses a sound-based move. First seen in Sword and Shield, and even Event Pokemon Toxtricity specifically holds it, which makes sense as it is a rocker Pokemon. I would also like to do a video about all the different sound Pokemon that could just get its own typing of, like, sound as a whole. I think that would be really fun. But ultimately, just like in real life, there are medicines to help with sore throats. Let's get toxic with Toxic Orb, as when it's held by a Pokemon, this bizarre orb that exudes toxins when touched will badly poison the holder during battle. It's first seen in Diamond and Pearl, and is naturally held by Muck. Now, I'm amazed that the Alolan version doesn't hold it, but I kind of understand why, because at the same time, it could go either way, because the Alolan versions create crystallized forms of their toxins that fall off. The Grimer Alolan form lets these off, and they do degrade and they cause problems. Meanwhile, the Alolan Muck has these crystallized forms of toxin that don't break down, but people have to figure out what to do anyway, as the Alolan lines are used to help with cleanup of, like, what humans have done in the areas, chemicals, so on and so forth. Which honestly could be very bad if any of them do break down. Now, this item, the Toxic Orb, could just simply be Muck's form of those crystallized toxins, and is more rare as it stores most of its dangerous toxins somewhere inside of its body, until eventually something ends up getting catalyzed and allows this orb to be formed. Finishing out T, we have the Twisted Spoon, another classic that allows psychic type moves used by the holder to have its power increased by 20%. First seen in Gold and Silver, and is naturally carried by the Abra line, and honestly, it's literally just their signature item, as we see the trope of psychics bending spoons with their mind throughout all forms of media. The only U that we have is the utility Umbrella, which, when held, prevents the Pokemon from receiving any effects of the weather. It is first seen in Sword and Shield, and it's just a heavy-duty umbrella, which is essential in places like Galar, where the weather is a bit more unpredictable due to the bad and degrading environments. Weakness Policy allows the Pokemon's attack and special attack stats to raise by 2 stages whenever it's hit by a move that is super effective, and is first seen in Pokemon X and Y. No crazy lore here, just seen in battle arenas, as it's simply an interesting competitive item to have made with the purpose to be competitive. If you really want to stretch it, I guess you could say, like, oh no, somebody jumped into the competition and they got hit by something that is way too powerful that they're weak to. We need to have a policy here to, I don't know, do something so that way we don't get sued. I don't know. We're moving on. Getting closer to the end, we now have the White Herb. At the end of using a move, if that move now has the holder's stats lowered, or in any other way its stats have been lowered after that move, the White Herb restores the stat to normal and disappears after use. This is really commonly used with Shell Smash in the Pokemon competitive world, and is first seen in Ruby and Sapphire. Now, if we look at real life, white flying herbs, in real life, like those, used in the intention of soothing, cooling, and calming irritated and inflamed sinuses and lungs, alongside other supposed benefits. I only say supposed because you could, I found like hundreds of different benefits that are like, oh, it does this, it does that, and I'm just gonna recommend that if you ever see anything like that, please, and even with anything I say, take everything with a grain of salt, because I'm human, and I could be wrong, and I want everybody to make sure that you are looking at appropriate, scientifically sound research, that it has been peer-reviewed, instead of just assuming every benefit that someone might claim, or fact that someone might claim. The wide lens allows the Pokemon's moves to have their accuracy increased by 10% of their accuracy value, and it directly translates to Magnifying Glass, first seen in Diamond and Pearl, and is naturally carried by the Yanma line and Sableye line. Now, it is literally just a magnifying glass, even in design, and what's interesting is the Yanma line is known for having really, really good eyesight that's incredibly magnified. Meanwhile, when we look at Sableye, I think it's really funny because Sableye, knowing that it eats gems, searches for gems, and high-quality gems are, like, more tastier to it, assumedly, and its eyes are also gems. The idea that it would hold a magnifying glass to be able to look at these gems is really cool to me, and I don't know, Sableye's a funky little guy that reminds me of Stitch, and it makes me smile. Wise Glasses. When this item is held, the holder's special attacks are increased by 10% in power, and they are described as a thick pair of glasses, and apparently glasses make people look smarter. Do I look smarter half the time? Like, if I just take these off, do I look smarter? Also, you're probably seeing my eyes more because I found my actual good glasses, which stop all the reflection from happening off of them, which, I don't know, you'll see my eyes dart this way more because I have to quote so much. And finally, we end with Zoom Lens. When this item is held by a Pokemon, if the holder moves last, its accuracy is increased by 20%. And when the holder acts after its target, that's when it would be more accurate. In Diamond and Pearl, the description incorrectly states that it boosts the critical hit ratio rather than accuracy. And I mean, zoom, baby. You can see things far away, but it's not like a full binocular. It's just one, so a monocular, I guess? But with that, that is every single hold item in Pokemon. As always, if you know any additional information that I wasn't able to find or extrapolate information from that might support or go against anything that I've said, please say so in the comments or throw out your theories. Again, I tried to use as much concrete evidence as I could and state when I felt that it was more of a theory rather than something that was very direct. So let's just see what you guys might say. I want to say thank you so much for watching. In addition, please go check out my other content. I have 3 playlists, one of them with supercuts, which are entire games that I have played, Pokemon games or other games, cut down to like 40 minutes, maybe an hour, or Undertale Yellow, which is like the only one that's 2 hours long. Or the other playlist, which has all my Pokemon theories, analysis, and so on that I do just like this video, just in case if you felt like you didn't hear me talk enough and you need me for more background noise. And then alternatively, I'm still trying to get the playlist together for my commentary on the Pokemon series, which I might try making into longer episodes. Finally, I cannot ask you enough. This is probably the last big video I'm going to be able to get out before the charity stream on August 10th, which is going to be for the Children's Miracle Network Hospitals. I am aiming for a goal of $2,000, and it would mean the world to me, as when I was younger, they kept me alive, considering that I couldn't even laugh without having a severe asthma attack, and now here I am, healthy, happy, and able to talk without breathing for like 3 minutes. I don't know, it feels like that sometimes. It would mean the world to me. I'm playing Elden Ring, and any donations you do during the stream give you coins that allow you to directly affect my game, and you can even summon bosses and everything. It'll be a great time. I'm excited for that day, so please be there. And even if you can't donate, let other people know about it, because the link is live, and you'll be able to go ahead and donate early for a good cause. So, with that, as always, thank you so much for watching or listening. Don't do anything I want to do. Don't think I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!